Okay, let's dial that music back. And I think we're ready to go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio, and today we are going to look at some paintings by some of my favorite artists. Probably you are one of them. If you're watching today, you're probably one of them. If you're not one of the artists who contributed some of the artwork to today's episode, welcome to our awesome community of creative beginners, intermediates, and some of us are now have graduated to more advanced artists, and you can join them. And I would invite you to do that. Let's just take a quick look at where you could do that. You can join our Facebook group, and you can upload photos of the paintings that you're making, and I'll give you feedback on them, usually about once a month. We did this about 7 weeks ago, the last time we did it. It's been a busy last few weeks for me personally, but join the Facebook group here, upload your version of the paintings we make in class, or as I said, the ones you're making outside of class, and let's celebrate them. So we're going to do that in just a minute here to get going. This is what the Facebook group looks like. Here's Heidi posting a picture of Matthew Wong, and we're going to get to Matthew Wong, I think, today, depending on how quickly we go. And I appreciate Heidi also. Yes, this afternoon we're going to go do a little bit of trick-or-treating and stuff as well, even though tomorrow is Halloween. And tomorrow we are getting back onto the paint train. We're going to be painting Vincent Van Gogh's skeleton with a cigarette, or with a burning cigarette. So we're going to be painting tomorrow evening. I know that's maybe a little bit later for some of you on the East Coast, but that's the only time I can get away after having celebrated Halloween with our family. So just to let you also know, again, if you're brand new, here's a whole bunch of folders. There's a Dropbox link down below, and you can see in the video description below, and you can see all of these folders. These are all paintings that we have made just over the past 9 months, I think, together, since the beginning of February. And you can do all of these paintings. You can download the templates in there, and then here's the playlist for our master study series. These are, like, I mean, you know, we did painting on Mona Lisa. What else here? Robert Bateman showed you how to paint an eagle. Batman, you know, Whistler's famous painting of his mother. We did a whole series on Asian art, and we've got a couple more coming up here shortly. Peppa Pig for the little child in your family, maybe for Christmas, granddaughters, grandsons. And, you know, we've, what else? I mean, we did a whole week on Tom Thompson. We did a whole week on Vincent Van Gogh, which we're about to get to today. We're probably, let's see, I'm not sure how far we'll get down here. Again, here's Matthew Wong. That was a great class. A lot of people responded to that one really well. And if we just keep on going, like, there's so many of them. And then I just posted some of the upcoming videos. As I said, here, Vincent Van Gogh. Just tomorrow, Rembrandt on Tuesday. For Guy Fawkes Day in England, which we'll get into what that is. The attempted destruction of the Parliament buildings, and famously celebrated, or not celebrated, I guess the character was developed further for V for Vendetta, a film and comic book that was released, the comic book 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And then Edward Hopper, one of the most famous paintings, the Nighthawks, we'll take a look at. And then for Remembrance Day here in Canada, we're going to be painting Mary Ritter Hamilton's Trenches on the Somme, a painting that is you know, instrumental in the proliferation of the poppies. She didn't start it, but certainly, I mean, this painting was also remembered for being used on a postage stamp just recently. And there's also, again, our Paint the News series, where we've been painting photos and some videos from ghosts and Bigfoot as well, right? So lots of crazy stuff going on. So let's get right to it. I want to begin we're going to look at the art by a number of the artists that we've covered in class, and then towards the very end we're going to look at your paintings that you made outside of class. So let's get to it here. I'm just going to turn my overhead camera off because it's blowing cold air into my face, and it is cold. It's starting to get colder and colder here. So here we have, this is actually a photograph that Heidi posted of Lake O'Hara, and remember, this is the paintings that we did of Carl Rungus, and I think it's just really interesting to see this landscape that Rungus painted in the 1930s, I think, has remained essentially unchanged for, especially the past 100 years, but for maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, it's looked exactly the same. So Heidi posted this photo, and this is the version she did of the mountain and the lakes. This here is Lake O'Hara is in British Columbia, right near the Alberta border. And here's Eleanor's version. And Eleanor also posted a photo, I believe, that she took, and then here's her version of that painting, or of that photograph, because we could see the tree in the back. And then here's Paula's version. Here's Les's version. Maria's version. And then there's a couple of others that we're going to look at from another painting that Rungus painted. So let's go back up to Heidi's here. Like, these are amazing. I was really excited and a little bit terrified about doing this painting because, as we talked about in the video, there is some sort of flipping of warm and cool colors in this painting. We have some warmer colors in the background and some very cool colors in the foreground, and just sticking to the formula, and we painted some warm colors underneath the foreground and then put our cool colors on top of it, and same thing, we painted cool colors in the background and then put warmer colors on top of it. And it's still, because we could still, maybe you're not aware of seeing those colors, but they're there and they're helping to maintain that warm, cool effect, which keeps the cool colors in the background and the warmer colors in the foreground. So I kind of began this particular painting as a test for myself to see how well these techniques actually hold up in when we really push it to the limit, and surprise, surprise, they do, right? The formula stands. So this looks great, Heidi. Great job. I remember when I was looking at my painting afterwards, there was this, I don't know, I left this big, weird, solid blob of color at the very top. I didn't even notice it until later on. I'm thinking, that's odd. So sometimes, your nose is in the painting, and it looks like you did a better job of it than I did. And I'm just noticing, what's this little fellow down here? I don't know if that was, I don't think that was in the original. So we've got, it looks like maybe a little, is that a sea lion or Ogopogo? Even though it's Ogopogo lives, if Ogopogo exists. Ogopogo is Canada's version of the Loch Ness Monster, which lives, according to legend, in the Okanagan, which is not really anywhere near this. But anyway, here's Eleanor's version. Look at that. That is so cool. Turned out great. Yeah. I mean, a little bit less detail in especially the background and even in the foreground, but detail isn't necessarily always important, right? That's a lesson that the Impressionists taught us, right? The detail can be selectively employed or removed for the overall effect, or as they would say, the impression, right? So I imagine, I can't remember what Eleanor posted as these two different images here, but it is, you can see a very different approach here. So here's the one that I think we did in class, and then here's her version based on the photo that she took. And obviously the foreground here is much cooler blues and a lot more white in there as opposed to the original. But I actually really think you did a great job copying your own photograph, and it turned out really great. Again, it's just sort of mind-boggling how similar that landscape is from the moment that Rungus painted it back in the 100 years ago to today. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of other landscapes that are radically, unfortunately, different in a much shorter period of time. Maybe these glaciers up here have probably receded radically, unfortunately. But great job. I love this, painting this big stick in the foreground and getting some of these black colors in the foreground. I think was a really smart choice because it really helps bring that foreground closer to us. So really good choice. And this is really tricky, getting this kind of muddy sandbank shoreline done. I think worked really well. I think what you could do if you wanted to take this continue would be maybe to do a few glazes of a cool blue with some white, really super thin glazes over top of here, and that might help give even more of a super thin effect of water shimmering over that surface, with maybe even just a couple little pops of highlights, kind of like these lights, the reflections on the surface, but otherwise really fantastic. The one thing I would say, which is kind of interesting, is if you look at the trees here versus the way you painted them, here the trees seem to be going in a very horizontal way, as opposed to in the photograph, they're much more vertical. So it's interesting that there's a choice that you've made here in order to paint it, but that's one of the things that I see when I look, oh, we have more of a horizontal pattern. So I think the way to maybe amplify the vertical nature of these is just to maybe try to connect some of them vertically. But again, I'm just being nitpicky just because I want to try to give people feedback, and if people are kind of like, there's something not quite right, those are maybe little things that I notice, but overall, obviously, a huge achievement. And again, these are paintings that you guys made back in July, right? So we're here in late October, just a couple of days away from November. So I don't know how many, what's that? August, September, October, November, right? So basically 4 months or so since you painted this, and we're going to look at some of the paintings you've been doing in your own time since that are even like 10 times better than this. Not that this is a bad painting, but it is, I think it's kind of neat looking at some of these older paintings going like, wow, man, that's interesting because I'm much, much better now, right? So we'll look at Paula's here. That's cool. Like, one thing that makes I feel from this painting, Paula, is it feels almost like a landslide. I feel like a movement from coming up from above here with this glacier, and it almost looks like the rocks are splashing into the water. Again, really beautiful use of these cooler blues in the foreground, and we have a bit more of a vertical nature of those trees. Really nice job here, Paula. Great job. And then here's Les's version. Beautiful foreground, like that cold water. Again, this is a trickier painting that worked really well. I like some of this pink up here. That's really cool. Some of these pinks in the mountain, in the rocks, turned out really effective. Yeah, like the submerged logs, like you really get the sense that like this log is halfway underwater right there because of the way that you've gotten these little pops of white on top. Really good job. I don't have too many things to say about these so far here. Wow, look at this, Maria. Fantastic job with these logs. I would think maybe adding just a little bit of the same emerald green or aqua green, blue yellow, cold blue yellow, just a little bit of like a glaze over top of some of these logs, kind of like we were just talking here with Les, just to kind of push some of them a little bit further down. But I mean, again, nitpicking, I think it turned out really darn good. That's pretty cool. And I love all these little details in the mountain behind, which is kind of a little bit dangerous, because if you start putting too many details in the far background, right, it can sort of create an inversion, right? Because you'd probably want to have more detail in the foreground of your images, but I think it's tastefully done here. So great job. So we're gonna move on here. In the Dropbox folder for Rungus, I also posted another image of this moose, if anyone was up for it. And this is really cool here, Paula's version of this moose. That's a really great drawing. I mean, that's pretty cool for eyeballing that drawing, Paula. I'm really quite impressed. And then here's Eleanor's version of the moose as well. Wow. That is cool. I love the way that you've done these trees in here. I really feel the deeper space in here. Like these trees, we really sense a valley far down below. Very cool. And this looks like this is in watercolor, right? Or yeah, watercolor. Really nice job. Cool. And yeah, there's like kind of a playful abstraction in the foreground, in the brush here. Cool job, everyone. So great start here. So let's move on. We're gonna look at the work of that you guys did in response to Marcel Faron. And if you remember, Marcel Faron was a Canadian abstract painter. And this is the episode where I put a blindfold on and made a second painting using the blindfold, because that's something that she did, right? In order to have more spontaneous mark making, to get away from the part of the brain that says, no, that's not right, you can't do that. If you can't see what you're doing, then that part of your brain just has to take a backseat, right? And it doesn't always work, but it's certainly a fun little activity to do. So here we've got Eleanor's painting version of this. So we used a palette knife, or well, actually I used, even though I do have way too many palette knives, but I actually used, I think, a piece of cardboard to do this, because I know that not everyone has a palette knife at home, so I thought it would be kind of just interesting to show people you don't, just because you don't have the right tool for the job doesn't mean you can't do the job at all, right? There's still lots of ways to approach this. Very cool. Heidi. I like this yellow that you mixed into the white here. That is really effective. That turned out really cool. I like that a lot. Wow, very different. And then here's Lori's. Cool. You know, one of the great things with a palette knife is that you get these, this scraping, layering effect and the blending, right? That Bob Ross is probably most famous for popularizing, although that there were certainly, like, Gustave Courbet 100 years before him, was really the one to establish it as a method, but Bob Ross certainly is most probably famous in the pop culture realm. But all of you guys have done a really great job of getting that. Really cool. Although this almost looks like Heidi maybe used the same tools I did, or did this with some brushing, because it's slightly different effect. Right, same thing with Eleanor. I almost see some of the... This also looks like there could be some brush, although maybe a little bit of both. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just funny or fun to sort of, for me to see if I can figure out how they were done. Which is what I do all the time when we're doing our master study episodes, right? Is trying to deduce how the artist created these masterpieces. And this is fun too, Paula. I like that you've got this. I mean, this is kind of in the original, this little streak down, but it's always interesting to me because you're often painting the painting in a vertical format, even if the painting originally is in the landscape format, and so it's sort of like the painting goes through a transformation when you're working on it, when you sort of pull it upwards, I guess. Very cool. And so I just love all the layering effects that you guys are able to get here. Wow, that's cool, Susan. Look at this. I thought this was a really fun painting to make, And I just always think it's a great experience to try doing something totally different than what you're used to. And I know not everyone looks at this kind of painting and appreciates the skill and the technique involved, but that may also be because they've never tried it. And then all of a sudden you try it and you think like, whoa, okay, I thought this was one of those my kid could do that paintings. And then you try it and you're like, wow, if my kid could do this, I would basically go out and get a whole bunch of canvases and paint and be like, okay, you're putting you to work because you're gonna buy us a new house or something, right? Because you're like the golden goose. Yeah, these look great. I'm really proud of you guys for trying to do this painting. Great job, everyone. And they're all very different, right? Very different results starting from the same place. Huh. And also, also just by the way they're photographed, the color could change, and that could also explain why some of the colors look slightly different. Anyway, let's just keep on motoring here. Come on. So, it looks like I could only see one of these was submitted. This is our Philip Guston episode where we did 2 paintings. We did this one, and we did these this other painting, right? So let's just start here with Heidi's version of the line. And this painting, has this hand of God or reaching out and painting. I really like this painting personally. Obviously, that's why I chose it for this series. But I just found it so bizarre and strange, and also I knew that this might be something that we could do in a relatively short period of time. So I think if you haven't done any of these Philip Guston paintings, I think you might really appreciate trying to do them, because there's a representational quality. They look like things, but the way that they're painted, I think, is very liberating, right? Because they're kind of big, not goopy brushstrokes, but they're pretty bold strokes. They remind me maybe more than anything, more like Picasso, or not Picasso, well, a little bit like Picasso, but like Van Gogh, like especially the later Van Gogh paintings, where he's really totally embracing the brushstroke and not hiding the brushstroke, but just putting it right out there. So, great job, Heidi. And then here's another Heidi painting here. It's fun to play with the paint texture to get the brushy strokes. And Michael emphasized time and time again to go fast. Yes, right? That's also a thing, too, with this painting style, is because there is a difference between a very slow type of a brushstroke versus when you're painting faster. You're going to get very different results. And one of the things with these Philip Guston paintings is that he, as we talked about in this episode, he was originally an abstract expressionist painter. And during the late 1960s, he just completely abandoned abstract expressionism and started making paintings that look like this, to the horror of his friends like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning, who were just like, what on earth are you doing? And even though he was painting these kind of cartoony images, he still painted them like he was painting his abstract expressionist paintings. I just think that's really, really cool. And it does inspire me to think about how I could also do, paintings based on photographs in this very brushy type of approach. Really cool. Very cool, you guys. I love these. Again, Paula, I'm just always stunned that you'd make all these paintings just by observation and draw all the compositions out yourself. They always look really, really fantastic. May, great to see you here painting with us. May, of course, was with me from the very beginning, as many of you have been, but so it's always nice to see some of these old names and faces here. Very cool. And yeah, I don't have anything I can add to any of these because I think you've all done a really great job, especially with the colors. The one thing I would say, maybe Paula, there's a little bit more of cooler colors in the background. And I think, as we talked about in this episode, Guston, kind of like when we were talking about Picasso just last week, was, you know, very open to inverting some of those warm, cool color relationships that we've talked about, because Guston wasn't particularly concerned about creating depth in the traditional painting sense. Having said that, what I appreciate here is that you took the lessons that we've learned in every other episode and continued to apply them towards Philip Guston's style. So congratulations for listening to me all this time. So let's continue on here. Again, I only have one painting that was done in response to Attila Richard Lukács, who's a famous Canadian painter. And, you know, I really enjoyed this episode. I've met Attila a few times. I'm a huge admirer of his work, and he was very, when I was a young art student, I was very, very inspired by his work, because he was sort of like the bad boy of Canadian art during the 80s and 90s. And so if you were, you know, a young, probably male artist, it was like, wow, like, art can be dangerous. Wow, that's so cool. Like, because if you look at more traditional paintings, you just think like, oh, well, art is a bunch of old white guys who are painting these kind of boring old pictures. And then you see an artist who's doing things, and he's getting in the news, and he's causing all this controversy because of his artwork, not because of, although he had a bit of a controversial personal life that involved some drug use, but the paintings themselves were quite controversial. It's like, wow, like, that's kind of a little bit exciting as for a young artist to think that, like, art still has the potential to cause some discussion amongst the general public, right? So great job here, Eleanor. This was a bit of a trickier painting. One thing that I think is a good reminder, just as a little bit of a tangent on when we look at this painting, is that if you're going to be painting someone's portrait, it's a great idea to look for images that have relatively strong contrast. If there's shadows on the face, that can help make your portrait. It can help you build the structure of your portrait. It can help make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. It is quite tricky to paint a face where the lighting is very even. Like, even my face right now on the screen, the lighting is fairly even, but if I was to turn one of these lights off, I'd have a much more higher contrast type of situation. So for instance, let's say if I just turn this off for a moment. So now this side of my face has a lot more shadow. So if I was going to paint a picture of myself, I would probably opt for this type of a lighting situation more so than the previous one, because there's more, there's sort of more information for me to work with, right? Because there's more contrast. And we're gonna, if you really want to learn this, we're gonna be talking about this on Tuesday when we paint Rembrandt's self-portrait, in which almost his whole face is bathed in shadow, right? So that's gonna be, talk about taking a technique and amplifying it. That would be, so anyway, that's what Attila Richard Lukács did in this painting, which I think makes it pretty effective. Let's now quickly move on. So now we're going to talk about Vincent Van Gogh, and we're going to look at the paintings we made for Van Gogh Week. And I thought I would just start off here by showing some images that Irene took of the Imagine Van Gogh at the conventions. Well, actually, I'm not sure where Irene, if this was in Edmonton or Vancouver, because it's a traveling exhibition that's gone all around the world. So it was here in Vancouver. My wife and daughter and I went and saw it. And here's Irene here. And I thought it was certainly worth seeing for sure. And it was full of people. They are racking in money. It's like $50 a person to get in. I think for an artist, I think it's really important to see things like this and kind of know how art can be displayed and shown. It was funny. One of my best friends, who's a musician, who's making the music that you hear in the background very quietly, him and I were talking about this because he also went and saw it with his partner, and he was actually quite disappointed that the music really had nothing to do with the art itself. It was sort of just the greatest hits of classical music, and he said he would much rather have heard more traditional French music or even Dutch music accompanying this, which I thought was really a very interesting take on that, which I didn't think about, but in retrospect I was like, yeah, it's funny that the music, which plays such a major important role in this presentation, was fairly generic, right? And I think could have been much more finely tuned to create a more evocative spirit of who Van Gogh was and the atmosphere in which he created those paintings. Anyway, I just thought that would be worth kind of pointing out. Taking a quick sip of my tea here before I... Okay, so I'd be curious to know how many other people actually saw this Van Gogh exhibition. It was, certainly, anytime I see art inspiring other people around the world and people lining up to go see an art exhibition, even if it's these giant projections, makes me really excited. I think the one thing I wanted to see is, wouldn't it have been cool if there was actually just one Van Gogh painting, maybe in the last room when you left, maybe just a drawing or a print or something, all of which exist. I think that would have been like, oh, cool, now we've seen these giant, let's look at a close-up version. Anyway, maybe one of our paintings should have been there, a whole room full of our versions of some of those paintings. So anyway, let's move on here. Let's look at the Potato Eaters painting. And here's Eleanor's version of it. Here's Heidi's, May's, and Maria's. Wow, you guys. These are great. Wow. All a little bit different. Right? Each person choosing to kind of focus on a little bit of a different aspect of this painting. I don't know where I put mine. It's somewhere around here. I used to have it out for the longest time. Again, the Potato Eaters was Vincent Van Gogh's sort of first major painting. Considered to be kind of his breakthrough painting of the time. Obviously, it didn't, in terms of his career and public recognition, it had no effect, but for him personally, it was sort of, he saw it as his kind of masterpiece up until that point, and kind of like his thesis on painting. He threw everything he knew into this painting, and obviously it shows, because it's acknowledged as one of the great paintings of in human history, really. And this one took us a little bit of time. It was like 4.5 hours to paint it, but it's hard. Like when you have multiple people in a painting, multiple figures, it just adds more time on it. There's no other way to kind of get around it unless you want to do a very, very loose painting. Maria, I think you should be super proud of this painting. It is absolutely amazing. I think you did a really great job of capturing the colors and the atmosphere, the contrasts, the lighting, everything here. I mean, I hesitate to make any kind of comments or give feedback when everything's going so well. The only things I would say is up here feels almost a little bit too bright, and this could easily just be a quick glaze to darken it down, because it almost, to me, feels like a skylight or something, like light coming in from the outside, shining through, kind of like yellow tiles. I remember growing up when I was a kid, our house was very 70s looking when we moved in there, and it had these like translucent golden tiles next to the front door, and that's just the thing that always, when I see that kind of thing, it reminds me a lot of being a kid and growing up in that house and seeing that light coming through by the front door. But that's personal. I mean, I can also see it working really well in that it helps circulate our attention through the painting, because we move through all of the gazes of these figures, and then we come back up here and then come back around, right? So this idea of this circular energy moving through the painting, I think in many ways is very effective up here. Let's look at May's version. The color in here, we've got this very dominant greenish color, which, you know, is in the original. I think you've maybe amplified it a little bit more, and it gives this painting a bit of it seems kind of almost like a bit on the Halloween-y side. It's a little bit of a creepy light, and especially the way that this woman is looking at this child as maybe like, what's just happened here, right? I mean, I'm just projecting a little bit, or a lot on there, but that's the feeling I get. I mean, I think you can certainly keep it like this. I think you could also do a little bit of a glaze with a brown, very lightly, especially around maybe this edge here, just to, again, bring the focus a little bit more towards the center. But all of it, I mean, we're talking minor details here. I guess this painting feels a lot brighter, right, and less gloomy than the original. Like the original painting that Van Gogh did is pretty gloomy. It's a dark painting, really only lit by the singular candle in the center, and it's, you know, these people have been working in the fields, farming potatoes all day, and they're covered with dirt and sweat, and they're poor. All they've really got is potatoes and tea and maybe coffee to drink, and so it's a hard life, right? So I feel kind of like in your version of the painting, it's a little bit more, a little bit lighter. Wow, that's great. I love the look you've got on here, Heidi. Really nice. You know, I like how these figures pop. The one thing I would say is maybe if this figure had a little bit of black in it, it might pop towards us even more than it does. It is a really strange decision for Van Gogh to put a figure with its back towards us, the viewer, in the very center of the painting. I can't really think of anyone else who did that except the painting we're going to be doing for New Year's by Caspar David Friedrich, which has a singular figure looking out over a landscape like that. But it's certainly an odd composition. So there's so many things that we had to overcome here. I love this one a lot, Eleanor, too. This one, again, is very different than everyone else's. This one feels a lot more like an illustration, like a children's book illustration. It doesn't have quite the same dirty, musky, soot kind of quality of the original. It's much clearer. Like there's much more distinct definition of the chair from the background, whereas in the original everything sort of blurs together. So it feels more well lit. Much more. This is like the Hollywood version of the original painting. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that. It's just really fascinating to me to see all the differences. Right? Really cool. Great job, you guys. I mean, if you wanted to maybe, I mean, this is a, if you could certainly go nuts with glaze and just really darken things down, even on the faces. Would you want to do that? Should you do that? I don't know. Again, I haven't really seen anything that we've looked at so far today that I feel like needs any, like, is begging for to be attended to in any way. I'm pretty satisfied with everything people have done thus far. So now we're going to move on to Van Gogh's bedroom, and the bedroom in Arles. And I thought, you know, it's interesting that Deborah did the drawing, inner drawing class, the free drawing course that I taught here on YouTube a year ago. And that's linked in the description below. There's a link to that course. We did an episode where we drew Vincent Van Gogh's bedroom after learning a little bit about perspective. And again, I can't remember exactly how she posted this, but I think Deborah tried to do a version of that based on the illustration. And I don't know if this is, I think Deborah decided to just use the template afterwards. And I think these are the same, right? Yeah. But I do really appreciate that you tried to draw this whole thing out first, and then decided to actually use the template. Because it is one of the things with that original illustration is that if we look, you know, it's Van Gogh. He knew about perspective, and he used perspective, but he also deliberately sort of started to play with it in the same way like Picasso started to play with the warm and cool colors, and obviously perspective by when he went into Cubism and just destroyed perspective completely, or arguably may have used like infinite perspectives, right? You could say there's no perspective, or there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of perspectives all happening simultaneously in a Cubist painting. But it is, you know, in this painting, Van Gogh, you know, manipulates the perspective, and everything doesn't line up quite as nicely as one might like. Which is, I think, should be a good is something that we should take some encouragement and inspiration from, that because Van Gogh plays a little bit loose with some of those things, that's, if Van Gogh can do it, you can do it, right? You don't have to abide by these strict rules. Like, perspective is, for some people, a very restrictive kind of a system. And for some people, they just sort of toss it right out, right? Just like, once you learn the rules, you can break the rules, kind of thing. Anyway, let's just continue. I just want to take a look at all of the images that were produced here, because there's a lot of them. This seems to have been a popular episode with people. Okay, so maybe let's look at them again. Okay, and then let's go right down to the bottom. We'll start with these here, and there's lots of comments pouring in on the chat here. So let's take. So let's start here. So Susan's version of this, I like how it looks a little bit more blue, but I bet you that's the way it was photographed. In fact, if we just take a look at our color picker here. Whoa, where did... I bet you... Where is it? Temperature. I bet you the original is more like that. I think that's probably more like what it is, because it looks a little bit more blue than it probably is in real life just because of the lighting. But anyway, I think that's great. I love the kind of the looseness that you've managed to capture here. You know, in the paint strokes here on the chair, everything has that bit of a wobbly quality, which is, you know, a trademark for Van Gogh. Like in here, these wobbly lines, really, really nice. Also really nice solid flat colors, which is not necessarily a Van Gogh trademark, especially towards the end of his career. But I think it looks really, really nice in here. Again, it reminds me a lot of illustration or children's book illustration, which I love. I've taught children's book illustration, so I don't mean that as a negative, because there's just something really clear and clean about it. I think this is a great addition to your collection here, Susan. And here's Paula's. That is cool. I really actually like the way that you did the ground here, Paula. We've got very kind of coarse brush strokes, which is a lot more like the way that Van Gogh himself did this painting. So it's really nice to see that happening. I actually cleaned my brush strokes up when I made the painting. So very cool. And again, you did this, you eyeballed this and painted it. So that is pretty crazy. It's well done. You know, the one thing I would say is, you know, it's a little bit of a nitpick again, is if this is the bottom of the floor, we expect it to kind of connect maybe over here, in the corner to be over here. So if this is the corner of the room, this line might come much further out into here. Tiny little detail, but it's just worth just pointing out. But we just spent a few minutes talking about how Van Gogh really played with perspective, so you know, you certainly have the license to do so yourself. Wow, so very different. So especially when we look at, you know, these two paintings here, Susan's and Patricia's, you can see, you know, with Susan's we had very, very solid colors. Here we also have solid colors, but you've also allowed some of the foundational color to kind of come in. Like we have a bit more of a dry brush quality happening in here, which is just has a very different effect. I don't see one being better than the other. I think it's really exciting to see very, very different approaches to the exact same painting. Really nice. What I don't know what I could again. So even in here, like we have this very loose, like this color, almost just like the background color, the warm yellow we put down, and then you've maybe put a very light, almost like a glaze of brown over top of it. So this is kind of fun. Like it makes us think of like how quickly we can make paintings if we use the right color for that foundational layer. Wow, these are great. I was so excited to see these. Wow, May, that is awesome. That is great. This is, I think, the closest we've seen to the way Van Gogh actually painted this painting so far. Really nice, especially some of this stuff going on the far wall, probably more so than anywhere else. This area here is exactly how Van Gogh himself would have painted this. That's really cool. Yeah, you nailed, like, even just there's it almost looks a little bit like oil paint, the way that you've brushed this in here. We've got like the color almost seems to be mixing on the palette and these swirls in the canvas. That is great. I'm really impressed, May. Wow. Okay, let's keep on going because there's a few more of these here. Again, this looks a little bit more purpley, so I wonder if this is the lighting of the photo. But either way, I don't mind it having a bit of a purple cast. In fact, I always find it really cool when we see the painting sort of being transformed with the palette kind of slightly different. Where really good. Again, these paintings in the background, that's also really well done. I think the way you've done the cloth here in particular, Laurie, is very effective. Like this area of the painting is really nice, and this kind of mirror here, I don't even really remember doing that. I feel like you've nailed this corner here. I didn't even think about it as being sort of like a shaving space here. Wow, that's really interesting. You're causing me to think about that painting differently. And here's Heidi's version. Great as always. Really cool. Again, we have a little bit more of that dry brush quality going on around here, which is really kind of neat to see. Like Van Gogh was mixing different styles all the time, and especially at the beginning of his career, because he's just absorbing all of this information, right? So it's obviously just like what we're doing in each class, is sort of bouncing around between different styles, and until he felt confident enough to be able to express himself with his own unique style, which just emerges organically. Here's Gemini's version. I love that you did this on a square canvas as well, right? Which forced you to eliminate some things like the chair and the edge of like the two doors on either side. So it's kind of fascinating to see what you decided to actually focus on in this picture. And I think you made some good decisions. The only thing I would say is this seems a little bit strange with the chair being completely cut off here, especially right in the middle of a leg. Like, I probably would personally have moved it a little bit further in so that I could see both of these legs there entirely, or just eliminate the chair entirely. But I don't know. We're nitpicking. Great job. Here's Gail's version. Wow. Again, this has kind of the combination of a few things. We've got a bit of dry brush in a few places, and then also some pretty solid colors. Like this is this gouache or is this acrylic? It's hard to say for sure. But I love seeing the buildup of paint. The layering of paint is really cool. There's a thickness to this, I think, that is very satisfying. And then we'll end here with Deborah's. I'm not sure what I think this is just the way they were photographed here. So I think so we also have some layering of paint, but this one feels a lot thinner than, let's say, Gail's here, right? Gail's, I get a sense of like thick, opaque paint, whereas here I have a feeling of much thinner layering of paint, which is a little bit, a little bit different than the way Van Gogh painted. You've changed I love this. I didn't even notice it until just now. Like they've changed the paintings to the paintings we did in class, and then added Starry Night in the windows. You're always up to something a little bit sneaky there, Deborah. I appreciate that. Okay, let's continue here because we still got lots of ground to cover. And we'll look at the Cafe Terrace at night. And also just wanted to there's all these comments on here. Deborah says, I saw the Van Gogh display. I did like it. I did like that I saw it, but thought it was too expensive for 20 minutes of images and music before it all started to repeat. Great point. That is, yeah. There's, it's for the amount of money to see something that loops very quickly like that, because we were there with our daughter and thinking like, oh, how long can we stay in this room before we got to go? Because when you're with a 2-year-old, they only have so much of an attention span, and before you know it, it's like, oh, we're back at the beginning. Oh, so if we leave right now, we haven't missed anything, which is, as a parent, is a good thing. But you're thinking like, if I came here by myself, I'd be a little bit like, okay, that's it. Maria says, on the potato eaters, easy fix, thanks, Michael. And Heidi says, as I gathered, Imagine Van Gogh was In multiple cities, countries at the same time, the popular and commercial focus of Van Gogh's art has received certain disappointments among professionals. I'm not sure I understand what... I think, essentially, you know, the big thing, my takeaway from that Van Gogh was I came away, the Imagine Van Gogh exhibition was somebody's making a lot of money on this, because most of those paintings are in the public domain now. It's a little bit, copyright in art is a little bit tricky, because museums can renew the copyright by taking new photos of the paintings, and then those are technically owned by them as copyright. That's why a lot of museums don't want you taking pictures of it. That's a whole other thing. But I was thinking, like, all they need is a bunch of video projectors in this room and put some walls up and charge people $50 to get in, and you're just like, you're making, you know, millions of dollars a week here, and you can have them in every city in the world simultaneously. So it's like, wow, they're making a killing on this. So it did feel a bit like a money grab. Anyway, but I'm glad I saw it, because I want to be able to experience it myself and be able to form my own opinion rather than just reading a review of it, right? Lolly says, wow, there's some amazing paintings. I love this one. Lori says, I did paint that the room purple. Interesting. Very cool. I like that you made that creative choice there. Lolly says, I love how everyone is really bold, putting their own unique spins on these paintings. Absolutely agree. 100% Lolly. So let's, speaking of which, let's continue on here and let's look at the Cafe Terrace at night. Here is Gales. There was Eleanor's and then Gales, Gemini. Wow. Gerald. Gerald's a new member of our community here. Wow. Heidi. Not sure. I think it's just the lighting on these. Wow. Josh, that was cool. I just want to flip through them really quickly, and then we'll take a look at them all individually. Maria, wow. And Paula. And Vanya. Okay, so let's blow through them all really quickly, so it almost looks like an animation. So interesting. Okay, so how about let's start here with Vanya. Really, really cool version of this painting. I love I really feel a sense of glow happening here. The one thing I would say, and again, nitpicky, I love how all of them turned out, is maybe a little bit warmer colors in the foreground. Like right up here, we've got the same cool colors that we see up here and even in the sky. So it tends to kind of flatten that, or if you think of that background, like the street, it kind of pulls the street backwards here and gives it a bit more of a overall flatness as opposed to more depth. Tiny little detail, but you know, that's again just thinking about using the warm and cool colors in juxtaposition to create space in the painting is something that I've just sort of been talking, or it's sort of one of the, I think, kind of the core lessons that I hope people take away from it. And not that you have to obey it all the time, because like we talked all last week with Picasso, of all people, he's the one that learned that lesson very early on from his father and then said, you know what, out you go, right? So you don't have to listen to it. I do think, though, that Van Gogh used that in his painting there. Here's Paula's. Very cool. It's so interesting that, you know, here's a vertical oriented painting and you chose to do it as a horizontal orientation of the painting, right? So you're always shifting things and doing things from different angles. I'm curious to know, Paula, what your motivation is for you know, making decisions like that, because it almost seems very deliberate that you would you know, take a painting that's vertically oriented, but paint it in that sense, and then do the exact opposite on other paintings. So I don't know if that's to challenge yourself, or you see there's a potential to give us a different point of view. Either way, it is a bold decision for sure. I think almost the opposite of what I was just saying. We have a lot of warmer colors, a lot of like ultramarine blue, warmer colors. There is a bit of cool colors in here, but then we've got again this kind of warmer purpley color in the background. I would say if we had a bit more of a cooler color back there, we'd have more space in this painting. Tiny little nuance, but it's just things to think about. Wow, Maria, that is cool. Huh. I love all of the attention to the detail in here. This very impressionist, pointillist approach. Really, really nice. Lots of attention to detail here. I don't have much I can say here. I'm really proud of you for this. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is, you know what's really nice? I love the glow that's happening out here. And it's actually so nice that I want to see more of this white and yellow in here somehow. I don't know if the lamps up here could be almost like a much brighter yellow white to give them, because if they're causing this big glow out here, we would expect more of that to be also affecting the areas right close to the light itself. I mean, again, tiny little detail, but you've done such a great job out here that it makes me, it actually brings my attention back to this area. But, you know, these lights back here, the way that this sort of just, this cobblestone street just disappears around the corner is fantastic. Great, great work. Wow, May, look at that. That is cool. Really nice. I don't think so. I mean, this goes to what I was just saying, right? Like how much this really glows. I mean, it's almost the opposite. So this really glows, and we have less of that glowing effect happening out here. There's a bit of it, but not quite as much. Wow, these are great, you guys. There's nothing I can really say here, but I'm really proud of you, May. Wow, and Lori, look at that. So this is, you know, when I was talking about adding a little bit more white to that warm yellow to get that glowing effect, here we really have it. Almost to the point where it's a little bit much. I don't think it's too much, but it is riding that line where it's yeah, I wouldn't change it, but it's almost too saturated, but I think it works really, really well. Because the thing is, we want to keep, like, so I would say maybe, like, if I was to do something, I would maybe even put a bit of warmer yellow with less white closer to some of these edges, and just to soften it out, because, like, that makes that light seem super bright. And then we would want to have a little bit more of that light cascading out onto the street. I mean, again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these paintings. I'm just nitpicking a little bit, trying to see if I can give some feedback that might be somewhat helpful to people to see kind of what I'm talking about. And I think it is helpful to see them all together like this, because then we can kind of see the little bit differences in each one and see the strengths of each other's paintings, and, like Picasso was saying, steal from each other and be like, oh, I see how that's working? Let me take a little bit of that. Oh, I see. It's like a buffet. You're kind of just going down the line. Oh, I'm going to scoop of this, and then I'm going to take a scoop of this, right? So it's really cool. Great job, Lori. Wow, Josh, that is wild, right? I mean, it's funny, I'm looking because I want to see if I see this reflection in the photograph. I'm like, see if I'm trying to see it from a different angle, which obviously is ridiculous of me to do. But so this is you know, here we've got inside here much more of like an orange red emanating from these doorways, which darkens this and actually makes this scene somewhat more, how would you say, there's something a little bit menacing about that situation, like a red light glowing out of a room, like some sort of, I don't know, like out of a David Lynch film or something, right? Like there's something kind of untoward happening inside this red light, you know, bar or something, right? So there's something, you know, and the way that these people are lit with red, it's funny in changing, you know, this light being red, it changes a bit of the atmosphere a bit for me. That's really cool that different choices of color can make that change. Great job, Heidi. Wow, that is cool. Really nice use of these colors in here. I don't think I have much to say that I haven't said already. It looks great. I like the definition of some of these lines in here with the red. I think that works really well. Yeah, what can I say? I don't think I need to say anything else. Maybe a little brighter here. So I think, you know, that's, again, we're thinking this is one of the main light sources that's causing the light in the square here to be brighter. So I think we want to just amplify that. Now, I can't remember what the original Van Gogh looks like, and I've made a deliberate decision not to show them here because I don't want to be going back and forth and like, oh, look what you like. I want to sort of try to evaluate each person's painting as finished works in and of themselves that deserve to be seen as themselves, rather than just continually going back to the original and just talking about the deficiencies. Because again, at some point the painting has to exist on its own, right? And how can we make it a really successful painting on its own right, and for it to stand up on its own? So this is, yeah, really cool. Gerald, welcome, Gerald, here. I like your signature, Kaz, because Kazarowski, is that how you would say that? As someone with a name like Markowsky, I am used to people butchering my name constantly. So I like, yeah, anyone who's got a name like a Slavic sounding last name, I have great sympathy because I know exactly what that's like. Anyway, really nice, great job here. You know, it's almost like this one is a little bit more defined, like some of these dark lines up here, but I love how you did this right here. Like those little details, like that feels very Van Gogh here. Like more Van Gogh than Van Gogh. Nice bright, you got this nice lights happening right in here. Very minor detail, but you nailed that really great. And there's nothing else I can say here because I'm really proud of this achievement. So great job, Gerald, welcome. And Gemini here, wow, a little bit different. It does seem like it's a little bit more blue, like some fluorescent lighting in these photos. So I think that's giving the whole picture a bit more of a cooler cast. In fact, let's just play with the color for a moment here. Like I would venture, that might have been a little bit too much. I think, yeah. Anyway, you know, same things I've said. You know, now that this space has been compressed because it's in the square format, we've lost a little bit of the foreground where we have a bit more of the warmer blue. So if I was to do this, I would probably add a little bit more warm blue, let's say, onto the tops of these tables than is actually there, just to add to bring more space back into the painting. But minor detail. I like this little touches of white in here, and it makes me think maybe a little bit more white in the yellow on the ground. And so there's a lot of these paintings and they're fantastic, so I really want to try to give them their due, but I do want to speed up here. Wow, that is cool, Gail. It feels really dramatic with this black lines of the kitty corner building here on the square. Is really pulls us in this way. I think it is a bit of a distortion of perspective if we go back to, if we're thinking about perspective, whereas in the original, you know, if we just look at Gerald's, there is this diagonal, but it's not quite as dramatic as you've painted it. I don't mind it because it kind of carries through on the opposite side, so it kind of almost points us back and forth. The only thing is it might be pulling our attention away from this bottom right corner. So, you know, and maybe this line, rather than going kind of more vertical, I would say it should probably be going more diagonal and sort of carrying through with what, oops, this line here, you know, if you imagine it carrying through, I think it should go somewhere like that. Does that make sense? But like we've been saying, Van Gogh played with perspective, so you can certainly play with it yourself. It's just one of those things that if you want to be doing deliberately rather than by doing it by accident, and I have no idea if it was done deliberately or by accident, but sometimes people, especially with perspective, because it's one of those things that takes people a long time to wrap their head around, and I know this because I've been teaching it for decades, and it's one of the most complicated things for a beginner artist, intermediate, even more advanced artists to get their heads around. We see, you know, people trying to get the quote-unquote perspective right and making mistakes all the time. So if you're wondering, why does it look a little bit, you know, something, this might be a little bit off, that would be where I would say why it might be having a little bit of an unstable composition. But is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say so. Interesting. So almost now it's hard to say because this paper is wrinkled here, right? So I was going to say that this is sort of pointing us to the corner, unlike the last painting, but I think it's also just the way it's photographed here, so that I imagine it's taken from that angle, so we get less reflections on here. Really nice, very strong painting. In this area, I really like the way that the brush strokes also emphasize this plane as sort of, or it's this direction, right? So we really get the sense that those brush strokes are moving in this direction, which, you know, helps create this cyclical movement through the painting that that some people will talk about as being very, very important for to keep like locking the viewer's attention into the painting. Very nice. Great job, everyone. Well done. Wow. Okay, so we're doing pretty good with time. I think I want to talk about a few more, probably about 5 more paintings from class, and then move on to looking at the work that you guys have done outside of class. So let's now move into talking about Van Gogh's self-portrait, and this was the final day of our Van Gogh series. Although again, tomorrow we're going to be painting Van Gogh's painting with the skeleton, or the skeleton with the cigarette. We're going to be doing that in the evening as in celebration of Halloween. But for now, let's just take a quick look at these here. Wow. That's so interesting from the opposite. Wow. Wow. So these are cool. How about I'm just gonna, let's here Les's. Let's remove Les's up here because it's a different, I think a different version of the self-portrait. So I'm just gonna put that aside and let's just go through them all again. I don't know, I just kind of like seeing them flash on the screen really quickly. It's funny to me. So I'll just start here with Les. I love that Les also, just like Josh, decided to do kind of a contemporary, I think both of them talked about using contemporary methods to create this painting. So here, Les, obviously this is, we have a bit of a Jackson Pollock quality of splattered paint on the clothes, and then painting the background and the face in the much more, I guess, quote-unquote traditional Van Gogh approach, which I think worked really well. Now, we didn't do this one in class, but it is very similar to the other Van Gogh self-portrait, so I decided to include it here. I do think it's really fun. I've never really seen anyone do like the Pollock splatter effect as like a pattern for clothes, and I think that's a really inspired choice there. I really like that you did that, and I think it's you know, it feels very postmodern, and postmodern being a kind, people would say that we're living in the postmodern period right now, and that modernism existed from, let's say, 1860 to 1970, and then everything after, since the 1970s, has been post-modern era. But this idea of mashing up different eras of paintings, in, you know, an artwork from the 1880s with a painting from the 1950s, you know, is sort of the hallmark or trademark of the postmodern approach to painting. I got the string from my tea bag in my mouth there. Oh, our poor daughter up there is not having a good afternoon. My wife seems like she's having difficulty getting her to her nap. Anyway, I like how this is done. I feel almost like the background is a little bit... I'd like to see the background done with the same amount of attention as the face, because the face, you've done an exceptional job, and you've spent all this time doing all of these like delicate little brush strokes, and then the background has these big loose brush strokes, and I kind of want to see them approached in the same way that you approached the face, and given that same level of love, I guess. And Joshua's here, you know. I'm not sure what inspired this particular approach. I think you described it as a more contemporary way of applying paint. Definitely has, you know, it's funny, these kind of rectangular or square brush strokes and all these drips. Certainly not something that Van Gogh himself would have done. But it does have a very expressive quality, right? Which is, you know, one of the things that people would talk about with Van Gogh, his paintings being very evocative and expressive, bold uses of color and stuff. I like that. That's great. I would say there's something with these eyes and eyebrows that I actually think you would want to even push further here, because I feel it's like we could go one way or the other. I think I want to see this become even more stylized in this area here. Like, I could see this being kind of like a big black, or not black maybe, but maybe a blue outline or something, just quite radical shapes up here. That I you know, same sort of thing, like, you know, I think this is like almost like a great underpainting for something really, really interesting. Let's move on here and talk about Eleanor's painting. Wow, I love all of the detail here. It's like in the face. Really, really nice work. This painting was a tricky painting. It's a fun painting to do, but nailing the colors, like, I remember myself working in this area for a while, and longer maybe than other parts of the face, trying to get this color right. And I think it works. I feel like almost we want a little bit more of this darker green in here. Oh, I think I painted Vincent while he was dying or having a nightmare. That's pretty funny. I think it works really well. I think it's just that this area in shadow was a little bit trickier. And so I think it's because there's, yeah. But I don't mind it. It's just, I think that's just the first thing I think about. Wow. Gemini, that's interesting. So very, like, you took the colors and amped them up even more and have this even more saturated colors in here. I like that. I like that a lot. You really get this sense almost like of an explosion, like, because everything seems to be sort of emanating from these eyes, like kind of shooting outwards, and this hair, it's like he put his finger in an electric socket or something. It is very electric, and that is cool. The one thing I would say is you've got his mustache kind of comes off here. It makes me want, I think this part of his mustache would come down a little bit further because it should be closer to us. So yeah, I feel like this would come down maybe into this area, or moving this up higher so that that end of the mustache might be closer to this point. Anyway, small details, nitpicky, but I think it worked out really, really well. So let's look at May's. May, these are great. You've been having a great, or at least, I mean, we did these back in what, July, so you had a great summer. Obviously, that's very cool. I think another same sort of thing with this mustache. It seems like right here, this looks like where you've painted the top part of the center of the upper lip. I think that's what that looks like. And I think that should be right here. Because if this is the center of the nose, it should be right there. And then this area, the mustache, I think should be higher. A little tiny detail, but, you know, if you want to... It's probably not immediately noticeable to most people. But I would say, I feel like this area needs to come right here. But, again, small nitpicky. But otherwise, really, really well done. I love these purples and pinks in here. You nailed the eyes, the ear. Maybe is a little bit slanted, but I don't mind that. I think that's really cool. Everything else is great. I love the way you did the background. Beautiful job. Wow. That's different. Maria, that's really interesting. Obviously, you took a very different approach to the background. I don't know if it was like you're like, I'm just going to... Or maybe you painted something in there and then, you know, smudged it away or something. It does have, like, you know, a frosted glass kind of thing, or out of focus, like in a camera, like that shallow depth of field bokeh quality. Gives it a very different kind of feeling. What would I say here? I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy with it. The one thing I would say is that maybe looks like one of the final colors that you've got on here is this kind of fleshy skin tone, Caucasian skin tone on top, and it really feels like it's on top. And I almost feel like that's fine, but I want to see a bit of it under here, and then maybe some of the shadow back over top a little bit. So just in, like, right here. There's something about this cheek feels very hollow to me. And then I feel like I want something here, maybe green. And again, like, I'm not even talking about the original Van Gogh painting, because that's irrelevant at this point. It's just like, what can we do to fix this and make it even better? Yeah, like, I think maybe it's because of this cool red here. This is a little bit of magenta, I think, is because it being cool, it recedes, and it's kind of like thinning his... Like, I've got a little bit too much extra skin and weight on my face to get that gaunt, but it really does, that cool red seems to be kind of pulling his cheek in and really making him look very thin, which I see on this side too. I just don't know. It works. Maybe just it's a little extreme for my... And this, there's something about this that makes it look, this lesion on his face or something there. Let's look at Paula's here. Wow. That's great. Like, this is very colorful. More colorful than Van Gogh and more colorful than anyone else in the class did. I love the bright colors. I love this sweater. Like, I want to own that sweater. This looks like a really cool sweater you could get made somewhere with these greens and pinks and purples and blues. And again, you know, the way that all these lines radiate outward has this, like, explosion of color, right? Even in the face, everything's sort of radiating outwards, this light emanating from the eyes. Very nice, Paula. Good job. So we'll look here, Richard. I think this is the version 1 and then version 2. I think there was... Richard said he made some adjustments here, and I was looking at it before trying to see if I could... I think it said something about the eyebrows and then something on the cheeks. I think whatever change you've made here, Richard, is very subtle, and it's hard to see because the lighting has changed a little bit. So I'm like, is there something here? That's the first version, I think, and here's the second version. I mean, either way, it doesn't bother me either. It is funny that you flipped the painting and inverted it and changed it from facing one direction to the other. I will say there's something about this painting that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I feel a little bit like this is if the Muppets made a version of Vincent Van Gogh, it would look pretty close to this. And why do I feel that way? Again, I think that would be awesome. Can you imagine if the Muppets or Sesame Street, you know, Jim Henson, who created both, if Jim Henson released a Vincent Van Gogh themed doll, that's what this would look like. I mean, I love, and again, I don't mean that in a disparaging, negative way. With our daughter, we watch a lot of like Sesame Street kind of stuff. I think it might be a few things here. It might be the whites of the eyes being really bright and maybe a little bit less defined, which makes it look a little bit more cartoony. And then maybe the nose being so prominent and kind of round. Like, there's a real roundness and softness to all of these forms. You know, like in the lips, everything just feels very smooth in a way. Which I don't mind. It's just that's just the thing that comes to mind. So, like, I think if you just put a little, like, outline on, let's say, the top eyelids, and maybe a bit on the bottom eyelid, and just sort of defined because cartoon characters often don't have eyelids, or their eyelids just disappear when their eyes open, versus humans, or real people, if I consider myself a real person, those eyelids don't go away. They stay there, right? So here in this painting, the eyelids have sort of disappeared, which I think is what makes it, for me, have that little bit more of a Muppet kind of quality. But I see Maria says, on the Van Gogh self-portrait, true thing, Michael. I see it now. I'll try to change it. Let's see if I remember. Oh, because we were talking about the thinness. Now I look at it again. It does... I think it's just those tiny little details that speak to me there, Maria. Let's move on here. Wow, Susan. You know, again, we're thinking like the way Paula did hers, and now Susan's, this is also really bright. I think it's because we have a lot of white mixed into our colors, and so that's giving things like this real pop. I don't mind it because we've got, you know, these pastels, we've got these cool blues in here. It's just super saturated. I like this warmer blue as a shadow. I think that works really well in your painting. And it does make me want to see maybe a bit more of it right here underneath this part of the mustache. Maybe that's the way Van Gogh painted it. And I'm not going to look at the original to suss out the difference. Because if everyone is doing it like that, then maybe that we're just going back to the original. It just seems like this part of his mustache is a little bit unbalanced. Like I want a little bit more of that blue coming right down here. Either way, I think it looks great. You know, when we were talking about Richard and like the outlines, you could see that, you know, we don't have any of those in your painting, right? So those eyes just kind of pop right out. And then we'll finish up here with Vanya. And again, very bright colors, but it's just a different sort of like, you know, here we've got these blues and purples, and here we really don't have any blues. It's greens and browns and reds in the background. So, wow, very just different paintings, different approaches. Really cool. I like the use of this quite intense yellow, like these little pops in the eyes, eyelids. Really nice. Wow, I don't know what to say, you guys. I'm really, really impressed by these achievements. That's really cool. So, well done. I see Boone Helm says, I love them all. And Lolly says, I really love that one. I'm not sure which one you're talking about, Lolly, but I love them all too. They're all really cool. Great achievement. Okay, so that closes the chapter on our Vincent Van Gogh week. Again, tomorrow we're going to be painting another Van Gogh painting. Right, we're going to be painting the skeleton with a cigarette. So let's just move on really quickly. And I think we'll talk about maybe 3 or 4 more paintings. I'm not sure how many we have for each one of these here. We just have 2 versions of the Spider-Man. I thought there were more, but that's the only ones I see there. So here's Eleanor's and Gemini. Now, if you recall, this is more like how I painted mine. I replaced the background. The original image looked like this. That's what Eleanor chose to do. I decided I wanted to paint a brick wall to make it look like he was climbing down a wall because I didn't know what that yellow shape was. And so Gemini did this version, right? I think it's really interesting that we only have 2 versions and both chose to do it a different way. It's so interesting. It kind of changes things a lot. I love seeing when people do the painting differently, and we can kind of compare them back and forth. Little things. I mean, I love the way, the Gemini, that you painted these bricks. I think they turned out really well. In fact, even it looks like paper that's painted on. Oops. The texture that comes through really feels like that brick texture, right? It feels kind of rough. So that's an instance where using the texture of your surface that you're painting on can be a really effective way of communicating texture, the actual texture of the actual thing you're painting. Generally, I find I want a really soft, smooth surface for my paintings. So if I was to paint this, I wouldn't get the same quality that you're getting, but in this instance, it's really working for you. I also really like, there's a speed at which these brush strokes are painted on this forearm here and hand, which give it a sense of quick movement. Like I sense here that this hand is moving quickly, and that's all just done by that fast, confident brush stroke, right? Which is really effective. In fact, it's interesting the way that you painted that, right? Whereas all of the other little web paintings, like here we see on Eleanor's, she's articulated them more, which is not necessarily, you know, this is maybe a little bit more accurate to the original versus if we just look at Gemini's. But it does, you know, the fact that they're muted and less defined, again, suggests that the character's moving so fast that we can't see those details, right? As opposed to this one, Spider-Man looks more like he's stopped, that he's paused and is staring at us, maybe like a spider might actually do. Okay, let's carry on. And let's look at the art of... This is one of my favorite artists of all time. Ted Harrison. Well, I mean, they're all selfishly artists that I love. So let's look at these all together. Eleanor, Gail, Heidi, Maria, Susan, and Charmaine. Let's look at them again here. And then Beverly, who did something totally different, but still painted something in the style of Ted Harrison, and a very kind of a goopy, thick way of painting, which is very different than I think every. I mean, I don't know offhand if Ted Harrison ever used paint in that way. I don't think so. So it is fun to see this much thicker, goopier, cake-like approach to painting for Ted Harrison. I think it works really well, just very, very different, right? Okay. Oh yeah, so this house belonged to my great-grandfather in Quebec, and I just imagine the many memories here. I love when people take something that's very personal to them and then use what we're doing in class as either the approach or the subject matter, and then create something that's very meaningful to them. I think that's awesome. I strongly encourage that all the time. Great work. Well done, Beverly. I like that. I like that a lot. Very cool. And then so let's start. Let's look through these again. Maybe let's start with Charmaine, because I think this might be the first painting that we have seen of hers thus far. Although, obviously, Charmaine's been painting with us for over a year now, since very, very close to the beginning, I think. This is really nice. It feels very clean and precise, which is one of the trademarks of Ted Harrison, is these, like, just really... like, because not only did he make paintings, but he often did prints of the paintings, and then some were just prints of them in and of themselves, which I think that's what the cat was that we also did here, which we'll see shortly. But just has this really nice, like all of these colors are very flat. There's very little brush strokes, which again is the way that he painted. Really good job on this one. I like that a lot, Charmaine. Great job. I don't have anything to add to that. Same thing here, Susan. Really nice. Like these outlines, like to outline both of you guys. Wow, that is like, it's tricky to do an outline that is so precise like that. That's a great, like, some really wonderful brush control here. Ted Harrison would be proud. Would be very proud of you guys. And then here's Maria's version. Wow, totally different. And you've also extracted the people from the painting. And the colors are very different. You know, in the sky, I think I remember even commenting on this one too on the Facebook group. Because I think Maria may or may not have been happy with it. You know, yes, things are different than the original. But does that make it... is that a bad thing? I would never say so. It overall feels much darker, right? All of these colors here, we have a lot more grays as opposed to these a little bit. I guess these are, I mean, I can't remember what the original ones are, but it does feel darker. And the sun or the moon, I think this is the midnight sun, right? So it's supposed to be kind of like the sun in the sky. Does it bother me? No. I mean, it has a bit, for me, this becomes almost a bit more of like an alien landscape. More supernatural or something. And I think is those kind of things, if you see them as sort of like a happy accident and opening up a door to something else, then that's really exciting, right? Then we start thinking like, oh, this could be a whole new place. This could be taking place on another planet somewhere else in a different world. And the potential for that starts expanding, right? I see a bunch of things in the chat. Marie says, sorry for this one, guys. I really didn't try my best, I think. Wally says, Marie, it's still good. It's just different. And it's all great practice, isn't it? Marie says, I think I will try that again on canvas since this was on paper. Yeah, again, I don't know. It doesn't disappoint me, and I don't think you should be too disappointed in yourself. It's just different, right? And I think you've certainly shown in the past and more recently that you're capable of like incredible paintings. So if this is what it takes to get better, then that is a huge achievement, right? And that should be appreciated. So anyway, we'll move on here because I'm just looking at the time. Great job, Heidi. So this is, a little bit different. We do see a little bit more of the brush strokes in your version of the painting, Heidi, as opposed to some of the other paintings we've done. Does that bother me? Not really. It's just different, right? There's almost a bit of a dry brush quality that we see in here, which is, it sort of gives us a different way of looking at Ted Harrison's work. That's fascinating. It also looks like it's a little bit pixelated, like maybe lower resolution file. Let's look at Gale's. Wow, that's cool. So again, a slightly different approach. Like here we have, very solid colors, but there is a little bit more texture in here. So it really feels like a thicker paint, right? Like, almost makes me feel like this is painted with, I guess it's acrylic, but it looks almost like gouache or something. Like it feels almost sculptural in places, like it's so opaque, these colors. So I'm curious how you built that up. It feels like at the very least there's maybe 2 or 3 or 4 layers of each color in here. Very cool. Let's move on to Eleanor's. Wow. So again, we see a little bit more of a brushy quality in here, which if you want to keep that, you can keep it. If you want less brush, then it's just a matter of layering those colors to get a more unified surface. I think it works well. But one thing, just tiny little detail, I think that what Ted Harrison does, carries this little hill right in front of the mountain and behind in order to use the layering of those different landscape features to push this further back. Right now, it almost looks like this is in front of this, or that this is instead of a hill, it's like a shoreline that recedes and connects to that area. So it's funny, those tiny little differences cause us to look at the painting differently and to read it differently, right? Because I think, let's say, if we look at Gale's, I guess she doesn't have that either. I could be wrong. I just feel like I thought that that's what he did. You can see a little bit of this here, the way Susan did it, and even the way Charmaine, that this line overlaps that white line. I know you're like, my God, Michael, it's just this tiny little line on the side of the painting, which is true, but it's also a little thing that artists are aware of, and by modifying just that little line, putting one shape in front of another, can radically alter how we understand that space. Maria says, thanks for the encouragement. Lolly says, I'm learning something new with every painting we study. It all adds to our knowledge and skills, even if we don't get it as good as we want the first time. I love hearing that. It should all be a learning experience, right? If we're learning, then that's what we're here for, right? So here's, I think Heidi was the only one. I thought there were more people who did the cat, but I guess I'm wrong. So here's the cat, and then what was the comment? Oh, I started out painting Ted Harris the Snow Cat, but soon the memory of my own cat that passed away a few weeks ago made the painting more. I made the painting more and more my own. It was an emotional experience, and many changes have been made to reflect the thoughts that I had along the way. I think it has come to the point for me to stop. Please let me know what doesn't make sense to you. That's great. I love that you transformed this painting by Ted Harrison into something even more personal, and that you saw your own cat in there and decided to personalize this painting. That is really sweet. I love that you transformed the sun into like a flower, and then we've got flowers all over the place. These look like flowers or like cat paw prints too. That's fun. I never really thought of like a cat's paw and a flower as having similar kind of structure, which I kind of see in this painting for the first time. So that's kind of revelatory for me. And I like that the birds, which I think were all black in the painting, and I think this was a blue. I can't remember what the original looked like, but I like again that you've modified that we have maybe like the two, we have like the, like the devil and the angel on someone's shoulders, right? There's something like maybe there's the trickster versus the more benevolent bird here, right? And then here's kind of sailing away into the sunset. That's beautiful. That's awesome. That's really touching. I appreciate that a lot, Heidi. Thanks for sharing that and allowing yourself to be so vulnerable to share that personal story with us. That's very brave. I really do appreciate that. Because it's that being vulnerable like that encourages other people to also be vulnerable and to share, which I think is a hallmark of all great art, right? Allows us to connect and feel and empathize with one another. So let's move on here. We're now talking about Henrietta Mabel May. And I've got 3 again, I feel like maybe I missed a few, but let me know in the comments if I've missed your paintings. But this was I really enjoyed painting this painting. If you haven't done this one, Henrietta Mabel May was a good friend of many of the members of the Group of 7, including Lauren Harris. And some people would have said that they were very inspired by her, and not that, because often people are like, oh well, she must have been really inspired by them, right? Well, yeah, I think it could also go the other way too, right? So I loved the way that she used color, that she had these kind of solid forms, which is one of the solid atmosphere, which becomes kind of a trademark of the Group of 7, particularly like Tom Thompson, or even more specifically Lauren Harris and A.Y. Jackson. Lauren Harris even more, because he becomes basically an abstract painter towards the last maybe 2 decades of his life. Anyway, we're talking about Henrietta Mabel May here. The subtlety in this painting is something I really appreciate, because it's kind of a darker, gloomy, brownish painting, but as soon as we started painting it, we start seeing more and more of the colors that are there, that are kind of muted, but they, upon closer reflection, start to come alive. Just as, you know, after a storm passes, it might be kind of dark, and then the lights and life starts, you know, returning, right? So that's the way I kind of felt about this painting, is it's like a storm has just passed. So we had Eleanor's, Maria's, and Paula's here. Paula, that's wild. Is this, you know, you totally transformed the way that this painting feels. Again, you've taken a horizontally landscape formatted painting and painted it on a vertical. I'm so interested to why you're making that creative decision. I just gotta know. So then we have, again, Maria's here and Eleanor. All of them I think are fantastic. I love, especially here, Eleanor, we'll just start with you. I love how kind of, again, dirty this feels down here. It reminds, you know, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and during the winter, it snows, and we have these Chinook weather patterns, which means that all of a sudden during the middle of winter you have like a whole week of -40, and then it's like +30 for like 2 weeks, and then it's -40 degrees Celsius. So if for those of you who use the standard or the, what is the name of that, the imperial system, you know, we're talking like it going from from 0 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees to then 0 and back and forth. And so you have this thawing and freezing and thawing and freezing, and it tends to create like this, especially on the roads, everything gets kind of brown, and, you know, like the snow gets very dirty because it's melting and melting into the dirt and then freezing, and so everything kind of gets this. That's what this really reminds me of, and I feel like you did a really great job of conveying that here, Eleanor. That kind of dirty snow kind of thing. In here, Maria's got kind of a different approach. Doesn't quite have the same dirtiness or the brownness in here, but it also has a bit of kind of that coldness in that painting. It feels maybe this is after it snowed, but it's just about to get warm, whereas this one feels like it's been warm for a while, and now it's about to get colder again. So different points of the weather pattern, right? And then Paula's here feels like this feels a lot more colder, like I could go ice skating onto this giant lake or something in here. So it's what's so much fun about the more and more we get to know painting is how we can convey emotions and atmospheric like temperature through the use of our paintings, which is why I always find it, I'm always a little suspect when I read articles where people will go, we've been analyzing the paintings of Van Gogh or Tom Thompson, and we think that he accurately conveyed the weather in this painting, and it must have been done on this day because we know that and I'm like, you know, maybe what you're interpreting is just, you know, as like evidence of some kind of weather is just literally an absent-minded splatter of paint or a brushstroke that the artist was like, oh, I think this needs a little bit of yellow, and paints that, and then people run off and are interpreting it in a certain way. I mean, it's kind of fun to do that, but how reliable that is, I think, is dubious. So let's look at the art of Doris McCarthy, and then how many do we have here? Let's look at Doris McCarthy, and then I think we'll take a, because yeah, we're at painting number 52, and currently in class tomorrow would be painting 83. So there's 30 paintings between when these were created and where we are now. So I always I'm like, oh man, I gotta catch up a bit here. And we've covered 10. So maybe we'll try to do another one of these sessions, maybe next weekend or something, and try to catch up. But the one thing I do feel all the time is that as much as I want to catch up, sometimes people are just joining us now or people who've been painting for a while and like, oh, I want to go back and make that painting. So I try to give a little bit of leeway between when the video first aired to when we give the feedback, so that people have a chance to actually make a painting and then for it to be incorporated in these sessions. So anyway, let's take a look here at Doris McCarthy's Icebergs. Let's go back up. So, wow, different approaches to each one. Where should we start? Let's go up here to Eleanor. And so Eleanor obviously did this with a palette knife and got a very different... It's funny because the next artist that we looked at here is Anna Mulka Ahmed, whose paintings were done with a palette knife and are super thick. Those are, if you haven't done... I think rather than talking about her today, we'll save her for next time. And I would really strongly recommend everyone try doing the Anna Mulka Ahmed painting, or paintings, because we did 2 of them in a very short period of time. It's a lot of fun, and it is, if you've never really used a palette for painting, it's a very different experience, and it's not easy. But it definitely opens your mind to how texture can be used in painting and how we can get like the colors to blend, because you generally are using thick paint, so you're applying thick wet paint onto other thick wet paint, and you get a lot more blending happening, which is generally not a feature of acrylic painting, because the painting dries so quickly that you don't really have an opportunity to paint wet paint into other wet paint, which is how all oil painting behaves, right? So you get an opportunity to sort of learn a little bit about what the experience of being an oil painter is like. So actually, let's stay here with Eleanor's. Again, I love that you use the palette knife. I'm sure you probably pulled your hair out a little bit working on this because it's tricky. And you know, Doris McCarthy is sort of famous for this really like almost illustrative style. Like everything there's a precision to her work. And so it's funny that of all of the artists that you chose to attempt this style with was with Doris McCarthy, someone who's not notorious but famous for her attention to detail. But again, that was probably a fun like way of just for you of like, okay, I'm gonna choose an artist that does this, so that there's no way that I can do that, which is actually going to free me up. If I know that I'm not going to be able to approach that by doing it with the palette knife, then it's like, okay, this is great. Now I can just sort of have a little bit of fun. Great job. So let's now look here at Heidi's version. This is awesome, Heidi. Great work. And this actually, you really captured here with that dry brush, because it seems like a drier brush in here in a few places. In fact, let's see if we can zoom in. Is like, this is right out of her kind of playbook, and we see this in the work of members of the group of 7, but also in the Henrietta Mabel May. Like, she had a lot of dry brush as well in her paintings. And when I say dry brush, what I mean is you're painting with a brush that is almost dry. And literally sometimes artists will, and we've done this in class, but since I keep talking about it through the episode, you get paint on your palette and then put it onto your brush, and then sometimes artists will literally take a rag and just wipe off some of the excess paint, so that when you're painting, rather than putting gobs of paint onto the painting, you're you're dry brushing it. How else to this? So it creates a very, very different look that is very, very unique, and it's something that you actually see a lot of in like Chinese and Japanese calligraphy. It's yeah, it's just like it's just a really cool technique, and some artists like Doris McCarthy, Henrietta Mabel May, Lauren Harris, really sort of embraced and took on as their own. So this is really super effective. Great job. This is one of your great ones. Well done, Heidi. Let's look at, this is Maria's painting. Wow. So here we have we have a little bit of that dry brush quality, a bit happening here, not nearly as much. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as as Seinfeld might say. But I love the way that you've sort of taken it and made it a bit more your own here, which I always think is really cool. I love these reflections in the water that also feel like the iceberg under the water. It's a really interesting thing that she played here with, is both like depth, seeing the iceberg through the water, but also the reflection on the surface, that is a tricky thing to manage. Yeah, just looking at these, it makes me remember how much I love this artist. Her choice to use the outline here is and to use that yellow is when I saw that, it's like, what an interesting choice. Like, it makes at first it's like, that is really strange, and then it's immediately like, well, this is an iceberg. It's going to be reflecting light. It's like a block of reflections moving through the water. So outlining with yellow actually makes a lot of sense, because there's going to be that light hitting it from all edges. It's just not something I wouldn't have, if I was to make that painting on my own, it would have been the last thing that I would have thought of until exploring her work. And then we do it, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm taking that idea, I'm going to steal that and put it in my back pocket for some other time. It's so interesting here, Paula, the way that you approach this is a much more brushy, abstract approach to this painting. This looks a lot more like a late Claude Monet painting, like a water lily painting. So it's funny, thinking about like Paula, the way you did this, and even the way Eleanor approaching this painting too, is they're very different than the original artist approached these paintings. And so it's just funny to me, the decisions that people make in trying to create these paintings. So interesting. I see Paula in the chat says, sorry, landscape form got transformed into portrait mode. It was a crazy idea trying to fit it into the little space of my wall. Okay, so that makes so much sense. Okay, so you're I guess hanging these on the wall of your house, and you have a little space, and then we do an episode together, and you're like, okay, I've got this little place to put them on the wall. I guess I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this painting in that format so it fits into that space. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's so interesting that's how you're making those decisions. Very cool. Okay, and then we'll end here with our look at Doris McCarthy here with this painting. That is great. So this is much more along the lines of how Doris McCarthy painted, at least this painting. What I think is really interesting about Doris McCarthy is how her style, she used a few different styles and would sort of alternate through a little bit looser and then a little bit more refined styles, back and forth, not just in a chronological progression, but she freely went back and forth in her styles, which tends to be pretty rare. Most artists kind of stick with a style for a set period of time or throughout their whole careers, whereas Doris McCarthy was fairly ambivalent about that kind of thing, which I actually really admire. I think that takes a lot of courage to to allow yourself that freedom to take on different styles. This is a beautiful painting, Susan. Really, really nice job. Wow, that is really cool. You really nailed Doris McCarthy in this painting. I love it. Just very clean. If anything, it's more Doris McCarthy than Doris McCarthy, right? Like even the sky. Like, wow, that is really cool. It almost looks like a more illustrative type of a painting. And I can't remember some of your previous paintings if you painted them all in this particular style. Like, let me just see. Oh, you didn't do... It's funny because I just wanted to open this. It just somehow reminded me of Eleanor's painting of the potato eaters. A little bit more of this kind of a graphic approach. Anyway, let's move on here to talking about the work that you guys have been doing outside of class, and we got a lot of paintings here. So, you want to open all 87 of these? Yes. So let's give this computer a moment to bring all these great artworks of your guys' to life here. So I need a sip of tea here. Maria says, on the iceberg painting that I did, I have to say the photo does not make does not do the painting justice. It was a bit dark, so you can't see the details. No dry brush technique. I painted it quick, mixing the paint on the canvas. Interesting. Let me just go back here. Now I gotta see what we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely not a lot of it, of dry brush, but it does seem like there's a few places. I guess you're saying that the photo doesn't convey that there. Interesting. Okay. You painted it quick, mixing the paint on the canvas. Interesting. Very cool. That's a fun way of painting, is when you're painting so quickly like that, and you're actually doing most of the painting on the canvas itself. Okay. So let's take a second here to look at the artwork that you guys have been making on your own. I thought just to celebrate our achievement here, I'm going to open a little bottle of champagne or sparkling wine. Now, I don't actually drink booze. I don't drink alcohol myself, but I do have this bottle of... I've never had this sparkling apple juice, so I thought, and it's been sitting around for a while. Oh, this has... I was expecting it to be... do I have a... Here I was thinking I was going to be really smart, and do I have some tools to open this? I have a whole bunch of tools. Let me just see here. I could just go upstairs and get a bottle opener, but let's see. I wonder if this is still any good. So, let's celebrate all the work that you guys have been doing on your own. because I think this is where we really want to get to, right? This is where you want to be making your own paintings, not just replicating paintings by some of the great artists, but doing your own thing. So, there we go. So cheers to all of you out there. I'm so honored to have so many of you as a part of this community, and for it to be growing day by day is so exciting. So cheers to all of you out there. It just tastes like carbonated apple juice, which is great. I like apple juice. So let's now examine these here. We'll start out with Deborah. And this is an Echinacea plant. I know nothing about plants and gardening, so I'm the worst to give advice on flowers, but I think this is a beautiful, it seems like a fairly quick painting that you've made. It looks like painted on a black background, which is tricky to do. Painting on a dark background is, probably a really fun exercise. I'll have to think about maybe trying to do something like this in a class. It does get tricky if we're using the outlines, because if you paint everything black, the outlines disappear, of course, right? Okay. But I love the bee. And I love this sort of pollen that's kind of popping up. And this looks like, out of focus background. I like this out of focus background, these little white spots. One thing I would say is I would probably have, if I was to do this painting, I like this idea of the background being out of focus, but I would probably have spent a little bit of time developing that beforehand and then painted everything else on top of it. And I think you would have got some really cool effects back here. But, hindsight, right? I love this here. Deborah's also saying that her granddaughter is taking orders for unicorn paintings for all her friends, and now Deborah is busy at work making unicorn paintings, fulfilling all these orders, which is awesome. That must be so exciting to have a granddaughter who looks to you as like a great artist, who loves your paintings so much that she wants to give all her friends paintings that you've made. You're an awesome grandma that is really exciting. That's really cool. Good job. And really fun. These are great. This looks like a fairly small canvas too. Like, I would be surprised if it's not, if it's about the size of maybe a postcard or a little bit larger, maybe the size of like, maybe it's like 8 by 10, 6 by 8 or something. Just by the size of the texture of the grain here. So you're working on a very small surface and painting a lot of detail in here. Very good. I love the movement, the circular movement here. Very cool. And then Deborah also says, here's a watercolor painting of the Glenfinnan Viaduct in Scotland with a train that looks like Harry Potter's. And this is in a course that you've taken, or with another artist, I think on YouTube, Paint with Janet, I think is what it's called. And I think on the Facebook page you've posted a link to them, because I think some of these, Paint with Janet has done a few of these as charity, which is great. That's as a way of fundraising. That's so much fun. Great. This is a fun painting. It's interesting that this train, sort of the tracks just sort of disappear. My initial reaction would be either this train track to continue down to the bottom, or to develop this bush that it appears to sort of disappear into. But I hesitate to make any criticisms, especially with another instructor who's maybe designed this composition. But I think it is a really fun painting. It looks like it would have been a fun painting to do. Here's another painting by Deborah. This one based on, I think, which is this Wheatfield of Cypresses. That is really nice. I love your brush strokes in here. Really nice, like very confident, big brush strokes. A lot of people would not feel as confident making these big sweeping brush strokes in the bottom. So that's really cool. Wow. Good job. You guys are getting good. I'm gonna have to retire and you guys will just take over for me. Whoa, okay, hold on, whoa, let's just slow down, Michael. Where were we? Okay, we're here. So this is sort of what I was talking about up here, and so it's interesting to see that you've been doing that, right? So you, when I was saying painting that background in, we've got the background now much softer, and then you painted these bees on top. I would say it might be nice to have seen these two paintings sort of blended together. So because what I love about this painting is how you did the bee here, and then what I like about this painting is how the background has been done. So I almost want to see a more well-defined bees with this kind of blurry background, because it's really going to create a nice juxtaposition between detail and kind of softer colors. And so we'll talk about Dolores here. Now Dolores has posted a few paintings of doing some plein air painting, and I think some of these might... Let's just take a look at this. Wow, that is great. I love seeing the sky. Looks like it's been painted a little bit over top of some of the trees, which is something that, you know, a lot of landscape artists do. Or not a lot, but there's definitely a portion of them do that. Some of the Impressionist painters, which I think is a really nice technique, because it also makes it gives it that effect of the light pushing through the trees, especially when it's like when the sky is really bright. Works really well. This is a really nice painting. Really, like, to do this as a plein air painting, that must have felt really, really satisfying to do this. Well done. And then here's another one. Wow. And then I think here's the finished result. Great painting. One of the things that I used to do a lot of this sort of outdoor painting. I mean, I went up to the North Pole and made paintings outside. I'm the first person in human history to make paint a landscape painting en plein air at the North Pole. Maybe I'll just put that on my tombstone. But it's definitely one of those things that when I finish my graphic novel, that I want to get out there and do more stuff like this again. Very cool. I don't have any comments to add because I'm really impressed. I really like how you've done the sky here. It has a bit of like an overcast Vancouver sky. It's interesting because the original, it looks like there's a lot of clouds in here. I don't know how overcast how dark that sky is. It does look like there was a potential to paint lots of clouds, but it might have been, you might have omitted them because they would have been competing with these trees. So I think that's a pretty smart decision. Again, I really like the way you painted the trees and the light coming through the trees. Great job. Well done, Dolores. Let's move on here. Let's look at Eleanor's paintings. So Eleanor was really inspired by Diego Rivera, and you recall we did a couple of Diego Rivera paintings, and this is one of his paintings I love a lot. It was hard. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, and having to make the decision as to which paintings by Diego Rivera to do for a couple to focus on was very difficult. So I'm really glad that you took this one on, Eleanor. This is like a really one of his most famous paintings. It is a little bit more complex with all of these flowers in here, but well done. I also think the patterning you did on her is amazing. That is really cool. I wonder how you painted that, if you did it with a brush or with an acrylic pen. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning of a previous episode, because I just thought it was so beautiful, Eleanor, that you made this painting in memory of your sister. I'm assuming this is like a photograph of the two of you when you were much younger. And this is probably a bit of an emotional experience making this artwork, but it's so beautiful. All right, this is just like, what a nice way to memorialize, to remember someone really close to you. Like, that sky is gorgeous. Like, we're kind of walking into this beautiful, radiant, almost kind of like a sunset or sunrise. The way that you've painted the fabric is really, really wonderful. I love the bow here. And it's interesting, like, there's no shadows in this painting, which I could see as a deficit, as like a reason, you know, like, and you know, I could, you know, encourage you to add a shadow in a few places here, or just, but there's something about not having a shadow which gives these characters a lightness, right, that makes it seem like they're transcending the physics of our world, and that they're kind of like floating into the beyond or something, which adds to kind of the emotional power of the painting. So I think that's, again, one of the fun things we can do as artists is we can take a photograph, and then we can manipulate it in a way that can do things that the photo cannot do, right? And communicate things that the photograph can't do. So really, really cool. Very proud of you here, Eleanor. Wow. And then here's another painting Eleanor did. This is, you said, my son is a fly fisherman who wanted a picture of a rainbow trout. That's so awesome that you're sort of like now taking orders and fulfilling orders, not unicorns for your granddaughter, but in this case for your son. And this is a beautiful painting of a fish. I like also the, it looks like the ripples of the water. I'm trying to visualize, is this from underwater, or are we looking through the water at the fish? Either way, it is kind of funny. Like, there's this weird distortion up here, which I don't mind. It's just, it's definitely makes it a unique image. There's like this, becomes kind of this abstract form up here. It looks great. I mean, really, really well done painting this animal. Beautiful. And Eleanor did another one here. This is the Yayoi Kusuma painting, which was one of the a little bit more challenging ones, because, you know, the way that Yayoi paints is done deliberately to keep herself busy, to take her mind off of some of the her anxieties in life, right? So those of you that executed this painting and gave the, you know, your time and energy to make it, probably exhausted you, but it certainly pays off, right? It transforms into an awesome painting that is, you know, very iconic and unique. And if you have this painting up in your house, it's like, wow, people, if they come in, will look at it. Boone says, dude, it's underwater. I think I know what you're saying here, Boone, but it's not clear as to whether the photo that this is based on is underwater, or if we're looking at it from above and it's underwater. Obviously, the fish is underwater. Thanks for clarifying that. So Gail says here, this painting is called Jammin', and they use this picture from, they found a photo on unsplash.com, which is a site that I've used many times before, because people will upload their own photos there that you can use copyright free, and you can make paintings based on them. So strongly encourage people to explore that. Maybe let's just right, Unsplash. The only thing they ask is that you give some credit or recognition to the artist, but let's say you could type in anything like rainbow trout, for instance. Right? And you could take any of these photos and make a painting from them. So this is a much better, I'm not getting paid from them or anything, but it's a great site to go to find images that you can use, as opposed to going to Google Images, because those are images that people have posted themselves that they own the copyright to, right? So, there's many cases in art history of photographers suing artists for making paintings based on their photos. Most recently, the Shepard Fairey Obama, maybe. Let's see, there was the Obama. You've probably seen this painting. Is it going to show us? No. But you've probably seen this Hope poster, right? So the photographer sued the artist who created this, Shepard Fairey, for violating the copyright on that photo. So that's why using Unsplash, and there's a few other sites that are like that, you don't have to worry about, because let's say you make this painting and it like, you can then sell it, you could make posters, you could put it on t-shirts. So taking that little extra second to find a copyright free or public domain image would be a great solution. Anyway, thanks, Gail, for pointing that out in your comment on the Facebook when you uploaded this. As just a reminder to people, it's a great way to find an image to make your paintings based on. I think she said also that there were other people in the background here that she omitted to focus on the drummer. Great painting. I love the way you've executed it. Yeah. I don't know what else to say there, but I think it worked out really well. I think the one thing I would say that I feel is a little strange, it feels like the other leg of this chair is missing, right? The structure, because I would imagine that there's the other part kind of goes there, right behind this foot. So then we would expect the other foot to be coming right down here. Just a little tiny detail about, because sometimes those things can be a little distracting. If like a chair is missing a leg, you're like, oh, that leg, the chair would fall over, right? But otherwise, I love the patterning you put on here. I like the way that you did the feet, the drums. Great job, Gail. Here's another one by Gail. The lighthouse at Slate Islands, Lake Superior. One of my husband's favorite places. It's from a photograph. Really cool. This reminds me, there's a little bit of like a Maud Lewis quality to this painting. Who I really love. We did a Maud Lewis painting around Christmas of last year, and we have a bunch of Maud Lewis books because I love the artist, and also some children's books about Maud Lewis. So I read them every day with our daughter. I was very familiar with her work, and yeah, she would have painted these houses in a very similar sort of way. Really nice. I mean, I guess I would say that maybe having a little bit more of, cooler color in the background and warmer color down here might help create a little more dimension in this painting, but which is what you've done here. This looks like a little bit of a cooler blue, and then our warmer blue here, so we get a little bit more of this, right? Cool. And I think you've mentioned this artist before as an artist that you would like to see us cover in the Master Study series. So cool, Gail, look at that. I love these flowers. A watercolor floral to finish off the evening in my happy place. That's really nice. That is a really nice drawing and painting. And then I think you've done a few of these leaf paintings, these wet leaves. I really, really like this series that you've been working on. And I really think you should just keep on making more and more and more of these very effective, beautiful color studies. I love these, this dew or raindrops on this leaf. In fact, I kind of want to expect a few more of them elsewhere. But just these are really great, Gail. I'd love to see more of them. You could do a lot of them, and I think you could probably sell them too. This still life, I love that you framed it. That's great. I wish more people, I hope you guys, when you're making these paintings, that you're putting them up in your house, framing them, at least leaning them up on your mantles or bookshelves. They deserve to be exhibited, not just painted and then photographed and put away into a drawer somewhere. This is great. What does this remind me of? Is it like the French comedian Jacques Tati? That's what this reminds me of. Was it Monsieur Clouseau or something? There's a whole... Tati was a French actor and filmmaker who made movie. He was very inspired by like Charlie Chaplin. And if you've never seen a Jacques Tati film, highly recommend it. There's no subtitles because almost the entire film is without any dialogue, and they're made in the 1960s, 70s. Great fun films, really hilarious too. You know, it'd be like if Charlie Chaplin made a color movie in the 1970s. That's what Jacques Tati did. Because anyway, that character reminds me a little bit of it's kind of like a Mr. Bean like character. As I think of like Tati, Mr. Bean. Yeah. Anyway, let's keep on going because I got lots of paintings to go through here. I love this here. I feel like you did another one here. These pine cones. I love this kind of busy background, but it's not too busy and it doesn't compete with the foreground because the foreground has been painted much darker. So these pine cones really pop. Very smart. I love these bright colors in the background and how just quickly they're done. So we have a really nice juxtaposition between background and foreground. Great job. And then Gail did this painting. It reminded me of his dad and his love for indigenous culture. Very cool. I love the splatters. I love how her dress sort of goes from like a pattern and then it sort of turns into drips. Very interesting. Very cool use of incorporating those drips and turning them into clothes. I love this. I can't remember what you titled it. I just titled it Two Friends. But this is so fantastic. I think I've talked about this painting at the beginning of a previous episode. I'm so excited that of this type of a painting. I love this. It just reminds me of like spending time at the seniors home where my grandmother lived before she passed, and she was also in a wheelchair, and we would just sit and talk, and yeah, very evocative, very cool painting. And just I love like the hand on the hand, like it just reminds, like whenever like my grandmother always sort of did that, like she would just sort of tap my hand, like oh Michael. Lori says she likes the movement with the man and the dog, right? This there's very fast brush strokes in the background. Generally, I'm not a fan of because sometimes it can look pretty sloppy. But in this instance, it does kind of give a sense of movement and lightness to the painting. I agree. Great comment there, Lori. Here's Gemini going back to the Starry Night. Great painting, right? We did that, basically probably a year ago now. That very early episode. If you want to go back and revisit that, we did that one in like an hour and a half too. So really fast painting. Here's Gemini talking about how she's been doing the drawing course, the free drawing course. Again, the link in the description below if you want to take that. It's free. It's on YouTube. You don't have to sign up or give any information away. But if you really want to get better at painting, knowing how to draw will change your life, right? So Here's Gemini has been doing the course. I think she says she never thought she'd be able to do a painting like this until she started taking those classes, which I, it's very, I really appreciate you saying that, Gemini. But really, it's you did the work, right? And all it takes is somebody who's motivated, right? And you can start doing things that you never thought you were able to do before. Like, man, when a teacher hears that, that's like, wow, this is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. Really cool. I wonder what these like chariot drivers here. It's funny, like this is like the German flag. I'm not sure. I don't know what the story behind that one is, Gemini. It's very interesting. Here's Heidi's. I love the story behind this one. Heidi said that this is Tristan at English Bay. Her cat is not the kind of cat that likes going for walks, and would have loved to have taken her cat down to the beach, but the cat wouldn't go, so she made a painting of her cat at the beach. I think that's fantastic. Again, you can do things with painting that you can't do with photography. Now, of course you could edit this in Photoshop and make it, but it would probably also still look a little bit weird, whereas you can use painting to stitch these two images together into one. I also really like the way you did the water. There's a lot of space in here, right? We have this distant water, and it just sort of blends right into the sky on the horizon line way back there, and then you can see the water, the waves get bigger and they get darker as we get closer to the foreground here. So really, there's even just in this area, like if we just cropped this, right, we can see the distance in here, right? You can feel that, it's now super pixelated, that's far away, and then this is much closer, just with these, by adding less white into the paint, right? Or adding a little bit darker brush strokes. And then the cat is great. I love what is going on with the eyes of that cat. It looks like, I can't see it, but there's the suggestion of some sort of reflection in there. All around great painting, Heidi. Very cool. And this is another fantastic painting you've done here. This sculpture on in Vancouver. That is beautiful. This is like, I could see this on like a coffee mug or a t-shirt or postcards as your Christmas card that you send out to friends. Wow, great artwork. Let's continue down here. This is a very different thing that Heidi did, right? And I love that you include, this is your inspiration for that painting. These drips, you called dandelions, and then we're like, oh, that's so cool, right? So really interesting. We just look at it as a bunch of splatters, and then, but the way you titled it is very evocative and points us in this direction. Very cool. Heidi also included this. This is a portrait that was intended to be a surprise birthday present. I struggled with the values. I think this is a great painting. I don't see why you couldn't give this to your friend as a gift. I think it looks really good. I think maybe what might have disturbed you a little bit might be on the cheeks here. There's a little bit of this cold red. Works well, but I think it needs just to be warmed up maybe a little bit. So it's not quite, because it's so different than, let's say, her forehead or her chin. So I think just adding a little bit more of that same warmer color would do it. But even in its present state, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, you could go the other way, is to take this cool red and put it a little bit up here, because you're using it as like a shadow color. So if it was a bit in these shadows here, I think that would work right underneath here. I don't mind it. I think it's great. I would still give it to them. Another few things, what I really appreciate, Heidi posted a whole bunch of photos on the Facebook page of a couple of exhibitions that were at a local museum in Toronto, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and the Matthew Wong exhibition that was there. And so I think we'll talk about Matthew Wong next week just because of time. And then the Picasso exhibition that just opened a few weeks ago. If you're in the Toronto area, I'm sure, I don't think the Matthew Wong thing is over, I believe, but the Picasso one would be worth checking out, especially since we just painted 5 Picasso paintings. So let's talk about Heidi, a different Heidi, and these paintings that she did of these dogs. And I apologize, I can't remember the story behind these, but these are really fun. Great fun paintings. And these, you know, just like the other Heidi's painting of the sunset, would be really fun paintings. I could see a lot of people wanting to own prints of these, right? I mean, I love the detail you put into the architectural elements in these bathrooms. Really fun. I love the cat and the dog together. It's always like a really nice, when we see these two animals that are often presented in opposition to one another getting along, that is always very satisfying. I love this cooler blue underneath here as a shadow. That works really nice. Great job. I have nothing to say but good things about all those. Here's Helen's painting. If you remember, we made this Soba Singh painting, I don't know when we did this. It would have been like May or something. I love that. That turned out great. It's very interesting you decided to, because in the original there was a lot of pink, I think, in this painting, and the fact that you kept it kind of this gray but really focused on the clothing, I think it was a really interesting decision. It really sort of highlights the intensity of those big bright colors and the gemstones and the pearls. I think it's really cool. Really nice job, especially painting the face though. Really, really nice job. Congratulations, Helen. Good job. We've got a few here from Josh, and Josh is always a painting machine, so it's really cool to see all the stuff you're working on here. So here's a couple dogs. A little dog here. That's great. Yeah, good job, Joshua. Here's this painting. It's funny, this is Anthony Van Eyck. Van Gogh did a few copies of the same painting as well. These are great, Joshua. Really nice still life studies. And here's some doves that you painted. So I think here, well, here's the original. So this is the probably the most. This is the Picasso dove that Picasso did, and he donated the image to charity, I think to like UNICEF or the United Nations or something, and they made prints and sold them. So I love that you made this version, different than the two that we did for that International Peace Day, but they turned out really, really well. Here's Joshua did the Frida Kahlo still life that we did about a year ago. That was fun. It's cool to see that one appearing again here. It might be nice to see a little bit more definition. This one's painted really quickly. So obviously we know that you can do them because you can do painting like this, where you spend a little bit more time on it. So, but you know, if you're just going quickly and you want to get it done quickly, I think that's acceptable. I think this is a great painting. All right, really, really nice done. Good job here, Josh. I love the colors. I love the way the paint is applied. I like that we see a little bit of the undercolor, this kind of orangey brown. This is really, when you post this one here, Wayne Thiebaud is, you know, a really famous California based, or I think he's since passed away, but he was pretty big in the 1980s, American artist who painted a lot of like cakes and pies, like deli counter kind of stuff, as well as like streets, and always in this very pastel like kind of colors palettes. Really great artist. And I was like, oh, he would be a fun artist to do. So I've definitely put that in my memory bank for an artist to explore in the future. So I appreciate you sharing that, Joshua. And here's a great painting Josh did of Muhammad Ali. Really wonderful job. Again, what's really nice, even though this painting is black and white, is that we can see this kind of orangey brown underneath everything. And I think that's really cool. What a great choice is to put that a colored ground and then to paint black and white over top of it, monochrome, because that color kind of comes through and it gives the image a bit of like a sepia kind of quality to it, which I really, really appreciate. Okay, here's Joshua did one of a cowboy. He said this is your own original painting. Took a while to get proportions. I bet. Turned out great, Joshua. It's a very similar kind of palette to the Charlie Russell series paintings we did. Nice, another still life. He did this funny one, combining a classical painting with Minecraft, the video game, some pumpkins, some more still lifes. And then I love the way you're hanging these in your house. Really good job, Joshua. And this Van Gogh still life. So let's move on here. Let's take a look at Les. Here's Les did this pine cone. I love this. Really cool. Pine cones are hard to do because there's so much detail, right? There's so many of these things coming out in every different direction. Great job. I am a little confused by the background. I'm not sure, because it makes it look like this is coming out of the pine cone, or so I probably would have either gone for more of that even down here, or just gotten rid of it and had just like a solid color or a kind of a blurred out background. But otherwise, I really, the way that you executed this, I'm sure that took you a while and some really good careful observation to pull a painting like that off. I love this painting too, often considered Vincent Van Gogh's last painting. And I love the confident brush strokes in here. These big, you know, nice big brush strokes. Really great job. Love that one. Let's move on here. Oops. I think we got about 20 paintings to go here, and then we'll wrap up for the afternoon. So here's May's version of the, well, actually not her own version. This is a painting that she created on her own, which I think is fantastic. I love this abstraction. This one looks like it would have been, it took some time to do, but is a lot of fun. I'm really excited by this one, May. Really, really cool. And this one was done relatively recently too, so it's exciting to see you back painting again. I don't have any feedback or comments because I think it turned out really well. I mean, the paint is a little bit thin, so we see your paint strokes. So, but I think it works really well. Yeah. What am I going to say? The palette is also a really interesting palette. Like mostly we have like these cool yellows and warm blues, warm reds. So it's actually a very limited palette, and you got a lot of color out of that. Here's Maria, avocado. I like that a lot. This feels like a kind of, I like the bit of, again, it's kind of got a bit of a sepia quality, this kind of brown, and so there's kind of a muted quality, so it gives it this kind of classical vibe. Really nice. But one thing I would say is maybe this, the what do you call the center of the avocado, the seed? I feel like I either want this to be a little bit more round and have a bit of a highlight on here, because it looks like the light is coming from the right hand side, because we've got this, a highlight right here. So I feel like we want a bit of a highlight right on here where the light is going to hit it, and then potentially even a very small subtle shadow. I mean, it's darker here, but I would also expect that the seed is going to pop out a little bit, and maybe even a bit of a shadow on the other avocado that's right behind there. Otherwise, really great job. Here's Maria's, these flowers, great. I love you know, very different than the very first painting we looked at today, or as when I opened the champagne bottle here when we were looking at Dolores's flowers. Right, this one we've got a very busy background. I really like this. Really cool. I like these pinks. Maybe that you put pink down as a foundational color, maybe. But it works really well. And here's a portrait you're working on. I'd love to see this one finished. I didn't see the finished version of it, so I wonder how it all turned out. And I like the way that you're painting it. It's very architectural. A lot of these kind of square brush strokes. It's almost got a cubist quality to it, oddly enough. And here's Paula. It says, don't forget to take a walk. I like that. That's kind of what you titled it. And then here's look at this cool painting, Paula. I'm so impressed how you've made this painting based on Claude Monet, and that's a really nice painting, and you painted it in oil paint. So it's so interesting, Paula, to see some of these quicker paintings that you're making in your sketchbook, often during our classes, and then you go and you make paintings like this on a canvas with oil. It's like, wow. It's really exciting to see you like moving through these different materials and mediums, sizes of you know, it's this would have taken you a little bit longer, but it turned out really, really well. Oh, Maria says she hasn't finished this. You should. I also really like it in this stage too. There's something really compelling about the way, like, I would leave the face. I would just don't touch the face. I'm curious what you would want to do for the background, if you have a design or a color you want to put in there. Like, I could see I could see like a bright baby blue in behind. I could also see it being kind of like a yellow brown. I mean, yeah, those would be just off the top of my head. Paula says, thanks, Michael. This is a great learning class today. Thanks to all the artists sharing your arts. I love seeing them. I agree. Okay, Paula did the Starry Night, and you can see the video down there in the bottom. That's cool, and I like this one. Who is watching me? The horse has turned its head and is looking at us like, hey! I need a little more tea. Let me just get a sweater here. Man, summer is over, at least here in Canada. I know those of you down in Australia, the summer is just beginning. I feel like I need to get on a plane and go to the opposite side of the world and get into and experience some of your southern hemisphere. Okay, so let's continue. Richard, look at that. Wow. So this is a painting based on the movie Spirited Away, which is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's really fun. Obviously it's a Japanese anime film, or it's an animated film from Japan, and but the filmmaker who's famous, like all my students at Emily Carr, the university I teach at, are huge fans of this film. Many of them weren't even born when the movie came out, but have since, of course, seen it. But what's great about this film is how creative it is. It's very surreal and strange, and animals and plants are talking to the main character. So it's just very imaginative, very inventive, and creative. So I highly recommend this. Yeah, Spirited Away. Thanks, Richard, for sharing that. And great painting, too, by the way. Here's Cigar. Mona Lisa. And I remember we talked, I think I talked about this on the Facebook page, but I think this turned out really great. He said he had trouble making the face softer and was not that happy. I was just saying, like, this looks great. I think you should be really proud of yourself. I mean, yeah, you could make the face softer by adding another 100 layers of glaze like Leonardo da Vinci did. Or you could just pat yourself on the back and say, I did a pretty darn good job with this painting. What should I do next? I mean, little detail, but it does look like this balcony in behind does not match up, right? You see this line going across? It's almost like this line here matches up with this line. So either this one comes up or this one comes down, right? Not a big deal, but it is those little tiny things that can destabilize a painting. And just if you're doing it deliberately, that's one thing, but if you do it accidentally, it can be like, oh, that's a lesson that I'm going to learn and change, or make sure I focus on in the future. Here's Sandra. I love this. Like, after a late night at the office, I came home to immediately rewatch episode 5 and to make this painting. I was like, wow, that's awesome. You, after a long day at work, you came home and sat down and worked on painting. That is really cool. I really admire someone like yourself, Sandra, who is so committed to wanting to learn. I'm really, really proud of you, and that really is very touching for me as an artist to hear that. I'm gonna skip over something here. We'll share it towards the very end. Here's Sandra also painting the Agnes Pelton, and I love that you printed out the outline or the original image to study from as you were painting, to, I guess, get the composition on there. That's really interesting. Obviously, you know, some other people have the video up as they're painting, but it can be kind of hard. It takes some battery life out of your iPad or whatever. Let's move on here to Sharon. Sharon's been doing some great work and posting it to the Facebook group as well. I love these flowers. You've obviously been painting lots of flowers, so it's great to see some of these. But these are the ones that I get so excited over. This is, I think, well, we've got two here. Which one do you think is better? I think they're both. This is really great. I love this. Feels like I'm standing on a balcony overlooking the city, and I see this great, you know, here's a lawn, and this, I don't know if this is a actual goose or dove, or not dove, yeah, like some kind of swan, or it's a lawn ornament. And then this beautiful, like, valley here with the mountain on the other side and the nice cool yellow sunset. Great painting. I like that, but I think this is my favorite. This is probably my favorite thing that you've done, Sharon. This is a great painting. I love the misty, frothy water and the tree in the center of, maybe there's a river that goes around this little island. The tree is just sort of disappears into the fog around it. This keeps really, really great. The sky is beautiful, very evocative, right? The light is disappearing from behind here, and it feels like, oh, it's gonna be a cold night. Really cool. Awesome job, Sharon. I have nothing to say except praise for this painting in particular. Let's look at Shelley's now. I've got a few from Shelley. I think this is the first version. So this is a Christmas present that she's working on for her family. And then it's made a couple little changes, I think mostly in the foreground here. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't... Like, which one do I like better? It's hard to say. I do like the way all of this is painted. I think that is helpful. I think where it gets around your signature and you leave this little bit of a space around there, I think it, because now it really calls attention to your signature. I'd almost be just paint some of these lines over top of the signature a little bit. I don't think it'll distract from it. I think you were right. I think your instinct to put that there worked really well. The one thing that I would say is, and again, this is nitpicky, but you see how right here beside this like grain silo or farm house or whatever it is, how the background sort of just the horizon line doesn't connect behind here. So we've got these big hills, and then all of a sudden it's like there's a cliff in behind here where it all drops off. Even if that is the case, if that really was the case, that there was a cliff and the hills and everything disappeared, if that was true, I would make that cliff over here. I would actually just paint it over here so it's clear that that happens. Otherwise, for me, it looks a little strange that there's this drop off here and then we don't see it also behind here. Tiny little detail, but you know, if you anyway. This is great too. Shelley said, the granddaughter of a friend who has cystic fibrosis and is a very active child and is running around, so you're making this painting for a friend. I think that's really cool. First of all, I just love anyone who's making a painting who's intending to give it to a friend as a gift. You know, obviously this is going to become one of the most cherished possessions in their family, right? And especially of a child who's sick and, you know, one would hope will ultimately live a long and healthy life. You know, an image like this becomes very, very meaningful. Really cool. Great job, like the shadows. I love this water. Like, it's very clear that the main ocean is here, but this is sort of just the wet sand, and the child's running on the wet sand. You've done a really great job of communicating that. Like, this doesn't, like, I don't feel like if I stood here, I'd go waist deep into the water. It feels like I won't really get my shoes wet until I'm maybe right here, which is really hard to do. I'm really impressed that you pulled that off. Here's another one that you've made in honor of an elder in your community. Great. I love this. What an evocative image. Beautiful. Again, you're doing really good with these shorelines. Like, I love how, I imagine maybe you painted this warm red kind of up, or warm orange maybe up to this point, and then painted the blue over top so that you sort of get this faded look. And it's sort of at this point where the water drops, or the shore kind of drops down and the water gets much deeper, right? And I think that's really incredible. Really great job. Yeah, I don't know, nothing to say about it but positive stuff. And here's another one, a picture of for a friend of their children jumping off the dock. Great. What could I say about this? There's something about this rope that maybe it just needs a shadow or something next to it to make it look like it's laying on the dock itself. Like just a little bit darker on one side. And you know, I would probably be, even my instinct might be to paint a black line, suggesting it's the opposite side of the dock here that we see the thickness of that wood. That might be my instinct to put that there, but otherwise I think it looks great. Okay. A few more here. This is Shelley went to an art class at the local art museum and created these plates. They turned out really good. That's great. Wow. I'm curious what kind of, it looks like maybe some sort of transfer or method, or a resist of some kind, or what do you call that? Where you apply like a paint or like a glue, and then you paint over top of it, and then you peel off the glue, and obviously it doesn't let the paint get underneath. Just escapes me for a second, but either way, it would turn out really cool. These would be great. I'm sure if you made a bunch of those for Christmas, people would like them for Christmas presents, and if you give them to them, or if you make them and you sell them too. I just wanted to include these really quickly because these are based we talked about these paintings months ago, but I really appreciate that you kept doing them here, the Wu Guangzhong. And then let's move on to Susan. Susan did these 4 abstract paintings. Let's just take a look starting from here. And then included them with this dog. I don't know what I think it was just kind of this funny juxtaposition of that you included the dog with these paintings. I can't remember why or what the story was, but it is kind of I mean, it is interesting because we have these dark colors, you know, which are like the dog, and we also have, you know, this purple in here, the light, this sort of tan color. It kind of maybe looks like it could be the collar or the belly of the dog or something, but it does, you know, especially when you put it there, it's like, oh, interesting. There's some kind of link that we're supposed to make between these very different images. So next here, we've got 2 more things to look at here. Here's an image that Charmé did based on this artist Ali Kamiri Magadam, who did all of these really cool illustrations of Pablo Picasso. In fact, it's worth just, let me just copy and paste this. Okay, here we go. If anyone else is interested in these images, I'll let this load up for a minute. Or not. Okay, give it 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're just gonna move on. So I think we'll just kind of lastly just end here with this array of paintings that Charmé has created, and I love seeing all of them together because probably a lot of you have similar kind of a situation where you've got a lot of your work that you've been making in these classes and on your own, and they're, you know, I love the way that she sort of put them on the windows. I don't know if she keeps them like that, or if they go on a bookshelf, like if she just arranged this for the photograph. But it is really cool. Like, it's very inspiring. Like, if anyone was to come into your house, Charmé, and see all this artwork, they would be so excited, right? And it would really maybe transform their image of you in their mind and be like, wow, you are a really talented artist, amazing work, right? And then that also helps us transform our own image of who we are, right? When we see these, because we stop thinking of ourselves as just a dentist, just a doctor, just a mailman, or just a, you know, whatever, but someone who also has this creative ability to express themselves and their feelings and thoughts and passions through their art. So it's really cool to see your art here like that. I'm really, really proud of you, Charmé, for all the work that you've done, and for everyone else. I'm so excited to see all of your guys' work together like this, to be able to share these times with you guys painting, and wow, it's you know, yeah, I don't even know. I feel like I usually people might laugh because I'm usually not at a loss for words. I obviously do these streams where I'm talking for 3, 4, 5 hours in painting along. But when I just think about how grateful I am to have so many of you guys in my life, and to be able to share my time with you, it's so, like, this has been, you know, a lot of people talk about like how difficult the pandemic has been, and I know for many people have lost friends and family members due to COVID, but and so that is horrible, it's tragic, it's very sad, but it's also, you know, when people ask me like, oh, like how's the pandemic been, it's been like, well, I feel like I've actually got a lot of stuff done, and you know, I've met all these new people that I count as friends, and I feel really, you know, in many ways very fortunate to have had this to have been forced to stay home and quarantine, and it's given me an opportunity to make all these videos, to create a different schedule for myself. So I feel really grateful and fortunate, and I'm so happy there's so many people who have joined me on this journey. And you know, anyways, this is yeah. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at the art of Van Gogh again. It's kind of a special late night episode for Halloween, so I realize not everyone will be able to join us, but it is one of the more famous paintings that Vincent Van Gogh did. It's a painting of a skeleton smoking a cigarette. Yeah, it's, you can decide to put something else in his mouth. I don't smoke either, but so you could certainly, you could be a chocolate bar, or a lizard, or anything else coming out of his mouth, or nothing. It could just be the skeleton. Anyway, I hope you join me for tomorrow night's episode and paint along with me, and upload your version of that painting, or anything else you might happen to be making tonight, or tomorrow, or any other time in the future, up to our Facebook page, so that we can talk about that maybe over the next weekend. I'm not sure what the schedule will be, but we'll see. Otherwise, like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to donate to the show, I really appreciate all your donations. There's a link to the PayPal below. You can use the super chat function while you're watching live on YouTube. You can also send a check or e-transfer by contacting me through the Facebook group. And all of the donations that people have sent in over the past year have managed to transform this studio. Everything you see on here is the results of your generous donations, so I really appreciate that. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Enjoy your evening. If you go out and do a little bit of trick-or-treating tonight, I know Halloween's not until tomorrow night, but if you do happen to go out, just be a little bit cautious, sometimes people are maybe celebrating, driving around after a few drinks, so just make sure that you're not one of them, and that you get home safely from wherever you're partying. Okay, everyone? We'll see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your evening, and we will see you again very, very soon. Good night, everyone.